the best part of you as a climber and the weakest part of you as a climber has to be a small gap, right? And you want to constantly be pushing that like best part of you as a climber, but do not leave that worst part of you as a climber behind, because you're gonna be so unhappy.
Okay. Tim, my dude, it's another pod. How's it going, man?
Josh, what's up? We're here. You got bad news.
What is up? Tim, do you remember 2 weeks ago we had a podcast and I was really psyched and you were really psyched. Life was good. You're moving. You moved. I don't know. I was bragging about how my kids weren't sick, how I was climbing. So now I'm the opposite. Now all those good things are bad. My nanny quit. Yeah. My nanny quit on Monday morning, which is a really bad time for a nanny to quit. I shouldn't say she quit. She is sick or something and in the hospital. And so that's awful. And that would be one thing, but yeah, I hurt my shoulder, wake surfing, Tim. Yeah. And I'm not even good at wake surfing. I just was learning this new sport. My buddy got a boat. So we're out on Lake Tahoe, which is a very fun thing to do that you can't say no to. And I don't know. This is my bad shoulder. I have hurt this shoulder repeatedly throughout my life. It's kind of my Achilles heel. Like I get injured in the shoulder quite a bit. And I think of myself as not the kind of person who gets injured. You know how there's often like people who just, I don't know, you're just like, geez, man, you always have something wrong with you. Oh, really? Ross?
Ross is the opposite of that. Sorry. I thought you meant like Ross never gets
injured. So I thought I was like somewhere in between. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I'll get a little tweak, but I've never really had a bad finger injury. Like of course, like we all get something, but I think of myself as being someone who doesn't really get injured, and I do a lot of work around that, but my shoulder does get injured, and I don't know why exactly. And I got surgery on a couple of years ago, and I've put a lot of work into it and all this stuff. But yeah, a few days ago I reheard it, and I'm bummed, man. I mean, hopefully you can hear that in my voice.
I'm so sorry, Josh. Oh, we're all sorry for you. It sucks. I guess, can I ask you some questions about it?
Nope. I mean, I don't want to go to, I don't want to obsess about it. Like, I don't know. It's this thing too, where like when I get hurt, you get bummed, like, and anyone, maybe other people don't get bummed. I don't know. And I feel like as I've gotten older, my advice is always to myself. It's like, you can't stop feeling bummed when something bad happens. And it could be like, not just an injury. It could be a lot of things, but typically, we're here on a climbing podcast. Let's just say it's going to be an injury. It happens to many of us, maybe not Ross. But it's like, how fast can you then get your head on straight, right? Like, it's like, okay, you're injured. Are you going to, like do nothing and be whiny and miserable for a month, for a week, for a day? Like, and so I feel like as I've gotten older, or wiser, or whatever you want to call it, I'm better at like feeling crappy for a short amount of time and stop, being like, woe is me, and saying like, okay, what now? Like, and dude, I was late to this podcast because I was on an interview for a new nanny, and I was also on the phone at the same time with the doctor's office scheduling like, an MRI and stuff. And, that's just, I mean, yes, you can ask me questions, but, I don't want to just like sit here too much and wallow. That's not me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome too. That like, your number one attitude is like, all right, this sucks. And man, I say this so many times to people, like if you're frustrated, because you didn't do well or something, or like something bothering you, like life's hard, like you're depressed, you're going through a bad breakup, or like whatever it is, that stuff is going to suck no matter what, like no matter what. You cannot forget it. You can't hide it, but you can try to do more. You could try to do better. You can try to make another decision. You can try to like add, right? You can always try to add afterward. And so I'm glad that you're thinking that way. But I guess my biggest question is, how bad is it? I mean, you're obviously just scheduling an MRI, but like, did you kind of know immediately? Because like you said, you've had surgery on it in the past. Like, that's probably the thing that's bumming you out the most, is like, you've already done a ton of work on it. and like now it's hurt again. But like, yeah, right away where you just like, nope, it's messed up.
I mean, I knew it was messed up because it kind of popped out and popped back in really easily. And I've just done that so many times. So I'm like, oh yeah,
Wow.
like that takes me out. So I don't know. It could be 6 weeks. It could be 12 weeks. It could be longer than that. Like you never know with injuries in some ways. And the trick is just knowing that you will get better at some point and then you find your way. But I don't know, with all that said, like, cause I just don't like, I want to be super real. And I was just talking to my buddy about this beforehand about, you know, oh, I'm bummed. Like I'm getting older. Like how many times, do I have to go through this? It feels like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, all that stuff that, I mean, I would think a lot of us have gone through that. And what's interesting is I know this guy has been through, God, this poor guy, my good buddy. I won't give him a shout out because it's not something you want to be shouted out for. Tore his ACL on a drop knee. And that's a bummer. Got it stitched together and then like got cleared for being okay. And then I watched him like tear it again. And when you tear your ACL and then, oh no, sorry, dude, I take it back. It wasn't ACL, it was his meniscus. And so they stitch your meniscus back together and then you can't bend your leg. Basically, the dude could not like bend his leg for something like 9 months. And he was like on crutches because he had 2 surgeries.
Whoa.
And, just like the reality of that. And he's a really active person, a really great athlete. And so, when I talk to him, it's like he gets it, right? Like, and by commended him, I was like, like it seems to work out for you. It's okay. Like, you show up, you do the work. And he basically made this point. He's like, yeah, but you don't know what my internal monologue was like. It was like really, really upset, right? Like, and I was like, yeah, but dude, you're so positive and you did the work. He's like, and he just reminded me that there's a difference between your internal monologue and then what actions you take. And so I've been saying plenty of upset stuff to myself, but I've kind of just been, I wake up, I do my normal walk in the morning, which is really good for kind of clearing out inflammation. I mean, I do a walk every morning, like before my kids are up. It's just, it's number one life hack. Like wake up at dawn and walk or jog for an hour. I swear to God, it's like the best thing in the world. Really good. But when you first hurt yourself, you're like, fuck that. Like, I'm going to go walk to the couch, and feel sorry for myself. But what's interesting is like something about like the habits I've built up and, I go to the doctor, I'm doing my PT already. And like, even though internally I'm bumming, it's like my external actions are actually in line with success. And now ideally your internal monologue should be like, oh, like, it's all good. Like I'm winning the World Cup next year. Like I'm still doing my projects. It's just, I have this little setback. But that's kind of like, I mean, maybe some people are like that, but I guess I just want to encourage people that even if you have some kind of like negative self-talk, that your actions are still consistent with getting better. And it's just like, you may not be perfect. Like it's nice to think that you have some perfect mindset all the time, but just show up and you can still feel bad inside, but I'm still here, right? I'm still showing up.
Yeah.
Like, still psyched. Yeah.
I was gonna double up on that. I definitely think that is a huge mistake for people to assume that like, well, that guy for sure has just a stronger mindset than me. Like that guy just has an easier time, and like people have said that to me so many times, and I take so much offense to it because I'm like, just because I'm happy on the outside and just because I'm positive and like support other people, it doesn't mean that I have it easy all the time for me. Like I definitely wake up and I'm like, nah, you lazy POS, like, we're not going to do this. Like I'm so mean to myself all the time. And that's actually what creates my willingness to make those good decisions. Is like, I know what good decisions are. I generally have to lean myself towards those things. And the more often I do that, I just understand that results happen, but it's never easy and I'm never happy with it. Like I'd rather be a lazy POS all the time and just like chill because, it's how I feel normal. But, you're not going to succeed being normal all the time. Sometimes you have to get out of that comfort zone. So yeah, it would also for me be nice if everything was super easy. Discipline was easy. Like going to the gym was easy, like all that stuff, but it's probably not for most people and it's unrealistic. So like being in that kind of uncomfortable state willingly and then making the best decisions, I think is definitely an important note.
It makes me think of David Fitzgerald talking about like focusing on the process and how like the harder things are, in some ways, like actually, I'll just say it, not even in some ways, the harder things are, the more rewarding they are. I think it's why we like to climb hard. It's why we like push ourselves. And, if it was easy, they're saying if it was easy, everyone would do it. And also it's kind of like, if it was easy, maybe it's not even worth doing. So,
dude, in line with the topic for today, by the way, like,
yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to it later.
Yeah. I just because, dude, I really don't want make a podcast around just being injured and being bummed, except for the F I'm injured podcast, which is helpful. I almost started, I just felt like for all those people, when I finally put this on YouTube, which, is slow going, I just wanted to address the elephant in the room that is the sling on my shoulder. For all you listening, you can imagine me with my normal sweater on, but with a sling over it. But I want to transition into, it'll be a graceful transition, because I was watching this Mallorca YouTube clip that I sent you, Tim. Jakob Schubert posted just this. Dude, I just love this video. I love Mallorca, and it's him in Mallorca, and he does a bunch of hard lines, and he does Alasha in it. And the reason why I'm using this as a transition is, so I'm bummed. I'm like, oh, I'm hurt. I had these ideas. I'm planning on going to Mallorca, not this fall, but next fall. And I'm like, I don't know, just, being that bummed, injured person. And then I had this like moment where I saw him doing La Ostia, which is this climb that's just mega. For anyone who watches that video, I don't even think they list the name of the climb, but in the first 20 seconds, it's this footage of just this massive cave that I know I've talked about in here, but it's just, and my memory. So the reason I bring this up is my memory of that climb is I'm out there with Greg Kirzner. Who's this? Do you know Greg by any chance, Tim? Anyways, whatever. Just kind of, if you know Greg, Greg. I'm not even sure I'm supposed to like say his name on the podcast because he's kind of low key crusher. I had seen this picture of Ethan on this climb, and Ethan told me it was amazing. And so I finally find someone who actually wants to go do it. And this is back in like 2018, kind of like the climb's starting to have its moment, but back then it was just, I don't know, we probably got like the third and fourth ascent or something. I don't know, like pretty like not popular. Maybe, I don't know, whatever, under 10, we'll just say. I don't even know if it's been done 10 times now. And Greg is just this wild man. And we park at this lighthouse and we just start walking down alongside the cliff. And I have no idea where I am. It's just open ocean, right? And the sea's a little bit rough. And he just kind of looks at me and he's like, "You're a good swimmer, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And we just fucking dive into the ocean and we just start swimming along the coastline. And then this massive cave opens up and you're just out there, dude. Like, it's less sheltered than other deep water solo areas. So you're just looking at the ocean. It's wild. You're swimming up there. You are so alone. Like, there's no cell service in your cave. And I climb up there. We don't know anything about where the line goes, other than actually he had wrapped down and tried to like tick some stuff. But it's a massive roof, so you can't like wrap down it. And we're just climbing, figuring it out, trying to like figure out the sequence. And I actually didn't do it that time. I flew back the next year and did it. But just that whole wild experience, it's so meaningful to me. And I was sitting there thinking like, dude, am I really going to like give that up and not go and do that? And so I was like, no, I need to like get back into shape. Cause honestly, this is kind of cheesy, but I was like, I want to take my kids out there. Like, I want them to have that same, like that wild experience where no one can ever take that away from me. Like, it's not even like the hardest climb. It's like 13C or something, but just that whole memory, it's like one of my most meaningful experiences. And I was like, I need to, get back on the horse so that I can, bring my kids out. God, that sounds cheesy. Okay, Tim, I've been talking way too long.
No, that's awesome, dude.
Take the mic, please.
That's awesome. That's awesome dad shit right there, dude. Like, I feel like, yeah, I have to ask you questions in, over the next coming years about you and your kids, because that's a huge experience that I think, climbing for me has always been a part of, sharing and, the community aspect, and like what's more to share. Who would you want to share with more than your kids, right? Like, and for what reasons? And I think that's so meaningful. And I learned a lot just hearing you talk about your kids in general. So, dude, that's awesome and inspiring.
You can borrow them. You can. My nanny's out. You can borrow one, man.
No, dude, I'm not gonna be your nanny.
Well, I mean, we even talked, we were talking about this idea of, I even was thinking about at one point, like making content or having a podcast about like traveling for climbing. And one of the reasons why is because of that climb, like La Ostia or Afro Man. Afro Man is this other deep water solo that's on The Climb by Chris Sharma. And dude, it's like just this experience of being in a cave, and you then like climb out these jugs, and just as you're just like kind of high off the water, it's like this hard move to a slot as it starts kind of like bulging out, and you're like, and then you're pumped. Let's say you latch that, right? You're pumped from all those jugs, and it's kind of a thin traverse, and if you miss this foot, you're going to pitch. And like I'm all about movement and grades. There's all sorts of reasons to climb, but I just feel like sometimes there's these climbs that get crafted by nature. I mean, this can happen indoors in some sense too, but there's so many things going on where, you know, the ocean is crashing. And but I mean, I could tell you about similar experiences on these, on, you know, boulders or sport climbs, but you know, just those moments, like I almost, yeah, I do want to share them with my kids, but it's almost like I thought about creating content or media around it to try to explain that perfect confluence of events where you just have one of those moments where you're just like, whoa, like that was that. I would travel across the world for that, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, dude, I hope I can join you in that Mallorca trip next fall. That'd be awesome.
Yes, please.
I'm so stoked to go to Mallorca.
Go watch that video if you haven't watched it.
I will.
Tim,
yeah.
and everyone out there. It's Jakob Schubert. It's called like Hard Lines, and I don't have it from. It's like, just look up Jakob Schubert. Like he just dropped it like a week ago or something.
That's awesome. There isn't a ton of like amazing footage from Mallorca yet. You know, like there's a lot of good footage and like a lot of, you know, but yeah, I imagine anything with Jakob in it's going to be amazing footage. So that's so exciting. So I'm definitely going to watch it. Dude, super cool.
Okay, way too much about me. I just, you know, you can always tell when someone's when someone's going through something where they just kind of ramble on. You're just like, okay, I appreciate that, everyone listening. You can see I was sorting out some of my, you know, thoughts about being injured on air. But, you know, I mean, it also is good to hear what actually goes through other people's minds. So maybe you don't feel so alone when it happens to you, because God, I'll say something bad will happen, even if it's not an injury, but shit happens. But Tim, help me live vicariously. What have you been doing, Tim? How's Las Vegas, dude?
Yeah, well, I think I just came back from Lander. I don't think I talk about Lander on the pod.
No, yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, you're not even in. This is Tim. Stop moving and just stay in one place for a little bit. But yeah, you went to Lander. Tell me.
I'm back home. But yeah, Lander was awesome. It was the International Climbers Fest, which is, my friend Steven made a good point. I don't know why it's called the International Climbers Fest. It's like a smaller event than, you know, a lot of other climbing festivals and stuff. But it's the International Climbers Fest in Lander. I think right before they did a 10 Sleep festival, so there was definitely a lot of people coming from 10 Sleep and stuff. It was a cool vibe, man. I mean, it was just kind of your usual festival, but like huge. And Lander is awesome. The Rock Shop got a lot of excitement. Brennan has been climbing. My friend Brennan's been climbing in the Rock Shop a lot. He said that was like his 20th trip or so out to the Rock Shop. Really cool bouldering spot out in Wyoming, pretty close to Wild Iris. So you just kind of stay in Lander and you can drive over. We did spend a couple of days in Wild Iris and just like put up draws, random. It was for me just like mostly a hangout, because BD asked me to go for putting up golden carabiners and like hanging out the booth, but I didn't need to hang out the booth because there was a bunch of people there. And so we were just hanging out the whole time, and it was awesome summer vibe. It was hot, so we couldn't really like send much, but my boy Danny sent that 14A that I flashed in the video. He almost flashed it, which was for me insane to watch. I've been watching Danny climb for a long time.
Danny. Damn.
Oh, dude, it was so sick, because we were like, end of the day, it was, I think we pulled on, we showed up to the rodeo free wall around 11 o'clock p.m. because we were putting up the golden carabiners. I was putting one up on this route called Atomic Stetson, which is, I grabbed, I think, 3 monos on the route, which was not very fun. And I had climbed 5 hours at the Rock Shop earlier that day, so I was wrecked. But Danny hadn't climbed that much, so he was fresher, and he was like, "Oh, I'll try rodeo free Europe." And he put the draws up, or I kind of like stick clipped or whatever. And the bottom, it starts off the very like second, third hold is a mono undercling, and then you like jump to a jug. And he was just like, oh, horrendous. Did that move first try, and then the next part was like just a big reach. He missed the hold, And then he was like, oh, I'll just try the rest. Flashes the rest of the problem, which is like from there alone to the chains is like a long V10 boulder problem, and he just like kind of easily flashed it, and we're like, oh shit, like he could have flashed it, and then he ended up doing it 2 tries after that, which was pretty cool. At like midnight, he sent it at midnight, which is sick.
Dude,
But
go Danny.
yeah,
Damn.
it was epic. But that was our
On
best
that.
like sending sesh. I think early that day we climbed at the rock shop, and I was trying a V14 like compression thing called Zeph. I did a lot of moves, but it felt just like hot, and the beta was kind of finicky, so it was hard to get the footwork correctly on the right time. I thought I could send it, but I wasn't trying to. It was just kind of like a fun vibe to climb a hard boulder, and we were trying it for like 2 hours. And Brennan had been trying it for like probably 2 hours before that, which was cool. And then we went around, tried like I did a V11 called Carlitos Way. Carlo added this V11 sit start to this V10 called Banditos, Banditos. And then we went to the UFO boulder, and I sent Josh a picture of this UFO boulder, and he was like, "That's my shit! Like that boulder is amazing." I was like, "Dude, this boulder is amazing." It's the cover of the Rock Shop guidebook, and there's like I think the V8's the easiest line on it, but there's like a V10 that goes right, a V11, a V12, and a V13. I flashed the 11, which was that like kind of, it's called smoking the tree, where you do this like big double clutch dyno at the end, which is awesome. And my next go, I just felt fried, but I flashed the 13 all the way into the 11, and I was like, oh, if I was fresher, I think I could have flashed the 13, which for me would have been like realistically the only 13 I've ever tried to flash. And I was like, this is of all ones that I could have, I think this is the one I could have flashed. So I was kind of bummed, but I couldn't do it afterward because I was just fried. Like every time I got there, I was just like, okay, I couldn't pull my arms anymore. And that only happens like 5 hours deep into an 80 degrees bouldering session. So
there will be more 13s for you to flash, Tim. I just want to shout out to Brennan, who also is the editor of the pod. So always
shout out,
big thanks to Brennan, and also heavily involved with Focus. Your guys' blockbuster film.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, dude. First of all, that stuff did look amazing. I don't know, just I like that kind of like thuggier style, like that kind of I don't know how to put it. Just slapping up compression, good hold, steep, and it makes me think of that video that Brennan posted of him doing the 13. I don't know what that's called, like the sit or whatever to smoking the tree.
The 13 was called. No, I don't know.
I think it's going to be on his Instagram, but
Bust the Lung.
Bust a Lung. Okay.
Yeah.
That double clutch dyno is so cool. I don't know. You have to go onto Brent's Instagram and watch him do it, because I think his hand blows and he like catches it again. I watched that like 8 times. So yeah. And good luck he looked close on Zeph. I think his buddy Kieran. I don't know Kieran.
He just sent it.
Yeah, he just sent it. I know he's a strong kid, up and coming. So shout out to him for putting that down in 80-degree heat too.
Yes. Yeah. So we basically, Lander was like a 4 or 5 day trip for me. And then I came back, and I mean, the entire trip, Michaela was just working on the house, and, we just bought a house in Vegas and have a ton of work to do. Cause I mean, it's a great house. It's not like falling apart or anything, but swimming pool and like just buying furniture and setting it up and everything. And she's remodeling the bathroom. So there's a ton of work to be done. And I just felt bad the whole time. So I wanted to come back home. Came back home, and we had a session at Refuge, which was awesome. I posted like a video of me doing a boulder, and it was awesome because I feel like lately I've been unable to climb as much, just because of like life things or traveling or whatever, and like not in the way that I like climbing. Like I like setting my climbing up, and like a lot of these tips I'm gonna talk about today, like that's how I like setting up my sessions, where I have like percentages of like climbing on the board a little bit, climbing in the gym, climbing some volume, and like always making sure that I'm training like somewhat regularly. And I have a lot of goals this winter, and I always fear that like if I'm not keeping up with the training, I'm not going to perform really well. But then there's that performance aspect as well, where you can work on your performance kind of exclusively from training, and you can get better at performance anyway. And the thing that I realized was like my performance is really good. Like I was really happy with how I climbed. I sent almost every climb in the gym first try, and including a project that I was trying before I left for Lander that I fell on like 7 times. I did it first try yesterday, which was awesome. But, a big thing that I wanted to say earlier was at the end of the session, I felt like my fingers were just like about to blow up. Like even this morning I woke up and they were just throbbing, just like swollen and throbbing. And I was like, all right, cool. Like I destroyed myself that session. It's like usually that could be associated with a good feeling, like you worked super hard. But, because I felt happy and like good, I was definitely willing to pull on more. And I just like, luckily the gym closed. And I definitely think that like, something to be said about injuries is that they generally happen when you don't expect them, but you could have expected them. And so for me, I'm definitely just aware that I haven't been training as much, and that training isn't necessarily to say that I'm not going to perform better. It's more so that I can't handle as much of that intense performance as I usually should. So just a little bit of a side pro tip for you guys. Like if you're not climbing as much, you got work, you got, relationship stuff, you're moving and stuff like that. It's not so much that you're probably not going to climb that good the next session, and you might not, because of actual physical reasons that you're not training and whatnot. But more likely, you're just going to be more susceptible to injuries. And so, a little side pro tip, like for me yesterday, if I wasn't lucky with the gym closing, I probably could have gotten hurt just from pulling on something stupid. And I probably could have told you afterward that I knew that was going to happen. And like, dude, I used to get asked all the time to like go mountain biking, like go to the skate park, like go to all these different things. And I would almost always say no, just because of like, not, and I would always get called lame and stuff like that, but mostly because I knew I was going to get hurt. Like a lot of the time, I'm like, I'm not good at that stuff. Like, I'm not good at that stuff. I'm just for sure. Every time I hop on a skateboard, I got hurt pretty much, and like for me, it was always, and I'm not saying like, your wakeboard, I would wakeboard. That sounds super, super fun, but
what
like
jerk, Tim, you called me out right now. No, go on. I'll give my 2 cents.
Yeah. But I just felt like no, yeah, you're good. I mean, I just felt like I personally always know what I'm like, could get hurt, and so I like try to stay careful about that stuff, but mostly under stuff that I can control.
Well, I just think that's a really good tip to recognize that there's lots of things in your life that add stress. That in hindsight, like if you had hurt yourself, you might have been like, oh yeah, I just had like a crazy last month where I was just in Lander and I had just moved and you were just on a training camp. And yeah, you had these big, big stressors. And even if you had told me, yeah, but Josh, I like maybe wasn't climbing as much, or my volume felt lower on climbing, but those other things add stress to your life. And this is something that I've talked about, where one of the things I've noticed about getting older is it's not that you necessarily are physically weaker when you're older. Like look at Jimmy's my age and he's climbing as well as he's ever done. But often what happens is when you get older, you get more and more responsibilities. So, it's something along the lines of, your nanny quit. I would argue that that has an effect on your ability to show up the next day. And actually, my nanny quit on Monday. I wasn't able to climb. I climbed on Tuesday. And you remember me messaging you, just saying like, "Oh, I had a terrible session, man. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me." And now you think I'd be clever enough after giving this advice to notice that. But my point is that be careful when you have a lot of stuff going on. And I just thought that was an interesting hindsight you had where you didn't get hurt and you thought to yourself, wow, maybe that was lucky. So, just a reminder to everyone. And yeah, as far as the doing other sports, it's actually one of the things that I'm most bummed about, that about getting older, is that what I would say is that I am actually the other way from you, Tim, where I'm like, oh, give me a sport, like I'm going to do great. I think it's my gymnastics background. I love skiing. I used to do giant, crazy jumps on skiing. And so when I see my buddies, I was better at the park than I was at crazy downhill, technical obstacles. But I'm like, oh, I can do that too. Like I'm always like, oh, I can do that. And yeah, I went mountain biking last week, and I've been saying to myself, like, look, is the risk reward there for you? And as I get older, this whole thing with my shoulder and the wake surfing, it was like if I had to do it all over again, like it was kind of like a little bit of a freak accident. I don't feel really bad about it, other than it's a bummer now. But one of the things that I'm actually kind of mourning now on this other side of the injury is saying to myself, gosh, Josh, like maybe you don't get to do all of that stuff. Like, if I got hurt climbing, it's like, well, if that's what you chose to do, you know, like you're going to get hurt maybe, but I'm kind of realizing that perhaps in my life, I need to say no to more things than I used to. And that's a hard pill to swallow. And I thought it's just associated with age, but perhaps also you're sharing something like if you want to take something seriously and go from good to great, Tim, maybe you need to say no to, you know, skateboarding even when
Yeah.
you're younger, just because if you break your wrist, you're going to be bummed.
I like what you're saying though about like, you know, you've always been that type of guy to be like, oh yeah, let's do it. Like, you know, whatever the challenge is, whatever the physical, mental, like coordination challenges, let's do it. And I think there's a lot of beauty to that as well. I think there's a lot of strength to be gained, you know, on all sides from just saying yes to those types of things. But yeah, having that kind of like hindsight first where you're like, okay, some things like personally, I would probably never go downhill mountain biking just because I'm not that good on a bike, you know,
It's
like
so fun, Tim.
it sounds amazing, but I know my weakness. Like I do know that I'm like not that coordinated on a bike, and I probably would just hurt myself more likely. Like if there's things like that where you like know I'm probably just less coordinated. It could be fun, but like what's the risk and reward? You know, like is the risk that I'm gonna like bust something super super hard, or I'm just gonna get scratched up? You know, because if I'm gonna get scratched up, then I don't care how bad I am at something. But if the risk is really high, then like why would I risk something like that? You know, if I
My
know I'm
buddies
not
get
gonna be like
all my buddies get
right.
wrecked on I have this mountain bike thread and they're always like, come on, Josh, like come join us. And like the thread is also just pictures of them in the hospital. Like, oh, like you know, here's my
Oh,
helmet
dude.
that I smashed up. And
Oh my God.
it's gnarly. But I mean, it's funny because I was saying something about like, let's just have like a fun, safe ride. And then after I wrote that, I said like, wait, but like, I think safety is inversely related to fun. Like it's more fun the more dangerous it is. So I don't know what lesson to learn here, you guys, but I will say that when when you pick a sport, like so I'm a climber, man. Like you're a climber. I love skiing. I you know, there's a bunch of sports I've done over my life that I really love. And there's nothing wrong with any sport, although I would say that some sports are kind of cooler than others where if I was in love with, I don't know, football or something, like I wouldn't have gone to Mallorca. And you know, like I love our sport because of the people I meet, the places it takes me. Um, but I think it's okay to fall in love with something and just enjoy that movement and that feeling of mastery. And I just want to give everyone like the license and okay to say like, if all you want to do is climb, like there's no secrets out there. Like if you all you want to do was ski, like you know, when you meet someone who's a top level skier and you meet someone who's a top level climber, there's way more in common than there is not in common. It's like,
Mm,
you know, it's like, oh, you went deep too. Like you love this thing. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
you love how your body, you love picking a line. You love like, and so I think it's okay to say no to, oh, I want to do Brazilian jiu jitsu too. It's like, I don't know, man. Like at some point you gotta just say like, this is me, this is what I love, and I'm going to choose to like, you know, I'm going to narrow my focus in order to like have that depth of experience and enjoyment out of a single sport. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay that you said no mountain biking, Tim.
Yeah, I think a balance is fine. But you know, if the boys say like let's go play basketball, I have no excuse to say no. So sorry to the boys every time they ask me if I want a ball. I feel like that's a good competitive place to be. Although I've broken my finger, the only times I've broken a bone were in basketball. So I will say that because basketball was the first sport that I did, and I jabbed my finger into a person once, and I jabbed my finger into the ball once as it was getting slammed into my hand, and I broke my finger twice. So
Do you know if AJ hurt her knee doing basketball? Alex Johnson, I saw
ooh,
on
I
her.
have no idea.
I haven't been following her on Instagram. I just like somehow bumped into her story and I saw that she had ACL tear and reconstruction. And
That
she
sucks.
in another post, I had seen that she was playing basketball again, and I was like, I I don't know, but I hope not. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I hope get better soon, AJ.
Get better soon.
Yeah,
We hope for the
yeah,
best.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, Tim, should we go on to the next next segment? Should we talk about
let's do it.
our buddy Jason Kehl? Uh,
Jason Kehl.
yeah.
Let's go, dude. I called Josh. I got this podcast sent to me because currently while we're recording this one, Jason's podcast hasn't come out yet. So I listened to it before, and yeah, some guests I won't be present for either life reasons or just because personally I think Josh can do guest podcasts maybe better than without me.
Whoa. There's always room for a Tim, but I'm glad that you were willing to listen to it after, even though I'm sure you were bummed you weren't there. But
yeah. And dude, I was driving back from Salt Lake City to Vegas, and at some point I just put on the Jason podcast. And, I think for me, I don't know how people feel about this, but like for a podcast that, if there's podcasts that I very much want to listen to, it's very easy to listen to them where I'm like, oh, this is a topic that I want to listen to and yada, yada. But like when it comes to climbing, it's a little bit less often that I get super interested in like people's deep thoughts about climbing, just because like I have so many deep thoughts about climbing that I'm already still trying to navigate them like literally every day. I'm like, what did I think about this and this and this? So I maybe have less interest in like hearing other people's as much, but that's totally not true because I put that podcast on and instantly I was like, what is he going to say next? Like, what are they going to talk about next? Like, what are they going to ask next? And this is not trying to sell out, our last episode. We don't gain anything if you guys watch these things. But
is this an advertisement?
It's not. It's totally not. Like, I do have to, reiterate this. Like, the podcast is just for you guys and it's for us for fun. Like, it's for us for fun, and it's for you guys for like perspective and help. So hopefully this guys reaches you well. I'm not trying to like sell out anything, I promise. I'm just going to read through my notes and I'll stop when I think that something is significant. Is that okay, Josh?
I just want to echo. I just want to like set people up where did you call me randomly? No, we just had a scheduled call. We were going to talk and you were on the road. Right. And, Tim, I'm like, how far are you on the Jason podcast? And you're like 42 minutes and 5 seconds. Like, cause we wanted to like hold your place so you could go back and do it. And you just got on the phone. You're just like, hold everything, Josh. Like, I think this is my favorite podcast. Like he's like, I keep saying this, but this one, oh, I like this one. And I can't remember exactly how you phrase it, but you basically like, Jason just says all the things that I was thinking, or his philosophy, it was infectious how excited you were, and you were only halfway through. So yeah, I'm excited to hear what you took from that half and the second half.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the first half actually was the half that I think like resonated with a lot, but the ending was like I think very good. It was a much like you're right in that kind of because we were talking and I was like, yeah, hop on the phone, was like, Josh, what do you have to say? Like, shut up first. Like, I got to tell you, first what I'm feeling right now. And then he was like, usually podcasts get better at the end because guests get more comfortable and like things get more lined up. And I think that was true. But, the thing that I told you was that I had never, I think, been so in line with, I think, my outlook on climbing with somebody, else ever as much as Jason Kehl. And that was kind of interesting to me because I never am like looking for people who see climbing the same way that I do. I don't think it matters necessarily, but it was striking to me where I was like, whoa, this guy, like, he's much older than me and lived a previous generation, but we see a lot of climbing things similarly. And I'll probably go into like those things that are similar. I don't think it's that significant, but for me, that just made it really fun to listen to. And I think a lot of his perspectives, the second thing that I said to you was that he's really confident in like all the answers he was giving to you. Like there was a lot of deep thoughts that you were asking him, like deep questions. He would take a second to answer, but he would give you like the most sure answer he could give you. I thought that was really interesting, and it says a lot about a person. It says a lot about like what they've thought about in the past, and it says a lot about, when you understand what someone thinks about, you understand why they do what they did, right? Why they did what they did, and like why they went for things the way that they went for things. And for me, watching like old dosages and just like seeing old footage of Jason, a lot of people like said things about Jason that had nothing to do with his climbing, just his style. And learning him, I was like, his style was significant. That was very significant. It empowered him in the way that it empowered him. It let him choose his lane like every time. And that's really important in a sport like climbing where, expression is the point, right? Like at the end of the day, something I felt from Jason's podcast was like, climbing is arbitrary, man. It doesn't matter, right? But it matters to us, and it matters to us more than almost anything out there. And so how we do it and how we go for it is the most important thing, because it doesn't matter. right? So when you're doing something that doesn't matter and you want to matter, well, you want it to make it matter a lot, your style and your expression is the most important. Just repeating myself 3 times, but I think that's super significant from Jason.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about how he just had an answer for things, because he clearly, not only had he thought about it, but it's like he lived his answers. Like they
Yeah.
weren't he was, I don't know if you know this word, like congruent. Congruent is this idea that everything he did kind of followed that same thread. It all lined up, like the sends he did, the lines he chose, now the career he's made in shaping and gym design. And one question I have for you, and I do really want to hear your takes. I mean, this is almost a question for the listeners, but since you were a listener on that, I want your take too. Jason, if you watch some of those dosage videos, or you watch that Evolution FA, which is a big part of that conversation, Jason has this kind of vibe of, I don't know, goth. I don't know. He's got he's kind of famous for having like different haircuts. Some of his videos and media has a darker, I don't know if darker is the right word. It's a unique style. And we didn't really talk about that too much. I just wondered, I mean, it's not that I was opposed to talking about that. It's just, there's so much about climbing to talk about. I kind of wanted to hear from everyone out there, like, was that missing? Did you guys want to hear about why he cuts his hair the way he does, or why he has kind of like this, I don't know, darker vibe that's kind of unique? And I thought that, I guess the reason why I didn't bring it up directly was because I actually thought that still was congruent with everything else he did. Like everything he puts out has that flavor. And I didn't want to like call him out and say like, hey, you have a haircut that's different. And it's like, yeah, great.
I think, man, I have so many thoughts on this, and I'm actually, I'm glad that you asked this question, because I did have a lot of thoughts about this, a lot of deep thoughts, because this is again where I also feel like, no, I don't cut my hair in half, and I don't like color things like crazy and whatnot. But I very much feel those things. And, when I was younger, I definitely wore a lot of like crazy colors. I collected shoes that were just like really, really weird rainbow colors and stuff, like wore rainbow shorts all the time. Like I painted my nails for a while. Like, I've wanted to do a lot of different things. I've always wanted different piercings, but my mom's a pastor and like would never let me do that type of stuff. But like, I've wanted tattoos around my entire body. Like I've always wanted to embrace the fact that, and like I said, dude, like I think this is a hard conversation, and I think this could be taken the wrong way. So let's just put a grain of salt on everything that I say. But I think some of us feel like we're freaks. Some of us feel like we're misfits, and some of us feel like the world doesn't understand us. And I think when you want to live that way, you really, really, really want to live that way. And I think that Jason, from my understanding, seems like a guy who just like knows his brain just like is chaotic and embraces it and like lives that like through and through. And I actually don't think he would feel any sort of negative feeling if you asked him just straight up, like, why do you do that? Like, what is this stuff about? Because there's a point to doing it, right? The point of doing it is to like express louder and like live that way. And I think I've gotten more comfortable with like society's norms and like, letting myself look, feel, act, talk a little bit more normal. But like, let's face it, man, like I speak loudly. Like I'm always trying to be like the most outspoken, and whatever it is, I dress however the hell I want to dress. It doesn't matter like to me what other people think. And you just get comfortable with that over time. But I definitely wasn't as comfortable when I was younger. I definitely needed people around me who were like much, much more like misfits and like much, much more just like freaky. So if you're my friend right now, Brennan, it's because I do feel like at heart, like you just get me. And like, I feel like I get you more and like all this stuff. I feel like that provides more camaraderie and like more community in the world. But, it definitely isn't a secret that like back in the day, Jason was climbing with like a specific crew. His crew, his groups like filmed in a very specific way, tried to show those things. And I think it's because inwards, there was a lot of chaos inside. And I think that's great in life, like to really embrace those things. It's very similar to that conversation we were having earlier where like, people just feel things, and to hide them is a mistake. To pretend that they're not there is a mistake. You want to live them and then make other choices kind of based on that. So yeah, I think that's my read on it.
That's that word congruent, where he's authentic. And I think like we just get so attracted to that where, he's not putting on a show. And yeah, I didn't avoid asking him about that stuff because I was worried about like offending him or something. I guess I just got so sucked into, yeah, I just got so sucked into the climbing and everything. I don't know. And now we're all sucked into that. But I guess like there's actually like the really cool thing to say there is to echo what you're saying is just, he really is himself. And I don't know. I think it's cool that all the way through everything he has done, whether it's media or the lines he chose, the names he gave those lines, the type of hold shaping he does, the gym design, like it's all very Jason. And it's cool to be able to, if you walk into a gym, you're like, oh, I bet you Jason shaped that hold, right? Like, and on top of that, something like evolution, it's like it takes someone like that to look at that boulder and what do you say? Like, it's like, oh, well, I just gotta go to the top. Like, why wouldn't you go to the top?
Yeah.
And like that seems maybe obvious to us now or something, but you gotta understand that's that out of the box thinking that someone special like that has. And so it's just interesting because, yeah, maybe he never, if he was just trying to be like everyone else, he wouldn't have been the guy who said, I'm going to the top of that boulder. And
totally.
yeah, I'll hand it back to you, but I just want to say that, dude, that first part talking about the evolution effort, just like,
so good.
So when I first saw evolution, I was in college, right? I was like, I don't know, junior or sophomore in college or something. And I've been going out to Bishop and I would literally just like, I don't know, just, yeah, I'm sitting in class. That's what I'm thinking about. And if you had told college Josh that he would get to hear all of that realness behind evolution, and clearly, you know, people, I said this on the podcast, people have literally made fun of me for how obsessed I am with that climb and talking about it too much. But so what? It's because it's awesome. And I think that he lent credence to that idea of how special it was. And, you know, the idea of being up high, doing hard moves up high was a big deal. And I actually was talking to a mutual friend of me and Jason. I don't know if you know David Gurman. He's one of the founders of Kaya, and I know him well. And he was actually roommates with Mike Aldridge at the time, the guy who was vying for the FA of Evolution and almost did the direct version. Yeah, I was telling Dave, I was like, dude, I just talked to Jason. It was awesome. And Dave's a little older and has just been in the scene. By the way, he was also with Jared Roth when Jared did that FA of Trent's mom, that amazing V10 in Joe's Valley. Yeah, sorry, I just lost my train of thoughts because I was just in my head. I was seeing Jared doing Trent's mom on the video, like with like two pads. It's all tall. Dave just echoed that whole thing of how big a deal evolution was at the time. Actually, Ethan Pringle talked about how big a deal that was at the time. And, you know, this kind of goes to some of our talk about what is a test piece, what's special about these climbs. And there's a lot of history, a lot of like something new, something had to get broken through that then kind of set the tone. And it's like evolution. I mean, clearly evolution's like a joke for you now, Tim. Like, you know, like if you look at your film focus, like I shouldn't say that because it's not a joke, and it was not a joke for me, and it was definitely not a joke for Jason. But you know, we have to recognize what it was at the time and what he kind of started. And it's yeah, I just want to like highlight how from multiple sources of really amazing climbers, how big a deal it was when that went down. And to hear that behind the scenes, I'm just so grateful to have that experience and for Jason to share that with us.
Yeah, I thought that history was quite cool. There's a lot to unpack with what you just said. I might not even go into it because that was awesome. But I do want to like go back to just talking about Jason approaching high balls and like stuff like that. Because yeah, I mean, you guys should just listen to the podcast. I don't want to go into it just because like you should just hear it from him. But also I do want to clarify that evolution is not what I did in my film. I did evolution direct. Jason did talk about the significance of like that line for him. And I want to go back and do evolution. I'll just say it right now. I'm going to go and do evolution just because I think it pays respect to Jason and like seeing that original line. And he did say something that was like really significant to me that it just needed to be done. You know, like I think that's a really, really significant thing. You know, he strikes me as someone who lives really honestly, right? Like I think that freako goth, you know, chaotic stuff for him is more so just him like living his life like as honestly as possible, right? It goes back to like how he answers your questions. It's like as honest as possible, right? He even says things that are like quote unquote controversial, right? Like there are lots of things that he said that would be absolutely controversial, but the way he says it, you don't want to pick on him for it. You don't want to like pick it apart or judge him for thinking that. You're just like, I don't agree necessarily. There's some things that I maybe don't agree with, but that's you and that's honest. And I think that's so much better than like sugarcoating it and being like, well, I think maybe like this. And he's like, nope, this is the truth. It's like, okay, well, like that's maybe not my truth, but it's your truth. And that's awesome. Right. And I think that's like going back to just the last thing I'll say about this, but like I'm really into watching people who are like very, like very out there, maybe it's not something that I would do personally, or like maybe not the stuff that I agree with all the time. But I think it's really important that we respect other people and like what they do and like how they live life and how they see it, and acknowledge that like maybe we wouldn't do it, but respect it because people are living honestly that way and people are really, really going for it. And like you said, Josh, like those things wouldn't have been done if that guy hadn't lived as honestly as he did, right? Because at that time, like let's face it, people weren't really doing that very much. And in my opinion, people are still not doing that very much. Like it's a very, very honest way of living and climbing. And, I think we would see a lot more in climbing if everybody lived like that, right? So for me, it was an inspiration. And I think I learned a lot from just listening to that podcast. That was awesome. But I do want to share. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to let you, I was going to say, Tim, don't you have a lot of notes?
Yeah.
Just because I was just looking at my notes, and he said this thing that really gets me about climbing. And it was just this, it's this idea of like someone, you just have to go to the top, but underneath that was this search that he talked about. And I think it had to do with FAs, but I think it also applies to, people like me who just go up climbs he's already done. Actually, I guess this applied to when he did some like first ropeless ascents of stuff like the Fly, but he wanted those lines or those boulders that kind of took your breath away when you first saw them. And that was really what I had that experience with Evolution. And I've had it with a number of other climbs. On the podcast, I talked about Teenage Phlebotomy. I don't know if you know that climb, but whatever. And, same thing like La Ostia. I saw a picture of Ethan on it back in like, I don't know, man, 2008 or something. And I just blew my freaking mind. And, it took 10 years for me to go and get it done. But that moment where you just go like, oh, like, what's that? And I, whatever that is for you, I think that's really cool. And it's cool that he kind of lived his life that way, finding those and, really added to those kind of boulders all over the world for other people to have that similar experience. And he kind of helped unlock them, and just thought that was so cool. So yeah. Tim, bust out your list. What do you got?
Yeah, I have a lot of basic notes. Josh's intro was great. It was a note that I wrote. I love that. It's actually what got me thinking like, okay, Josh is really good with guests by himself because it allows him to like ask a lot of it. I think it allowed you to give a lot of preface for like who he was. And, Jason has probably touched all aspects of many, many climbers' experiences, right? From gym designs to hole designs, yada, yada. I'm not going to go into it. That's on the podcast. You kind of, we went into Evolution, and I kind of just wrote here, like the Evolution story was so cool. But the story that was really cool to me was the name. And it was just kind of like came out randomly. He said that that guy Mike was going to give it a totally different name that was kind of crazy. And somebody actually misheard him. He said Evolution. And they were like, yeah, Evolution's sick. And he's like, that's way sicker. Like, okay, that's cool. And it just kept, and that's awesome. Like names are like that where like, now Evolution really gives you a feeling, like it's a pretty clear, like there's definitely a history to it. And you know that when you're looking at lines, like I think names are really significant, and people should definitely take them more seriously when it comes to how would other people for the next decade or two coming to try this problem, what would they feel with the name? I think names have a huge significance, and people should definitely take names really seriously. I wrote here, honor the pioneer. I love that Evolution to the Lip is, I think I was just saying that he said Evolution to the Lip is not a boulder problem.
No, hold on. Just because I thought it was hilarious. He made fun of that term because Sharma had climbed to the lip and jumped off, but Sharma didn't call it Evolution. So he's right. Evolution, that name came after the idea of going to the lip. So it's like, what is that? I don't think
why do we call
because I just want the reason why I think that's a good caveat is I don't think Jason, if you climb Evolution to the lip and then jump off, and here I'm doing the same thing where I'm calling it evolution lip. Let's just give me that wiggle room and jump off. I don't think Jason's going to be like, hey, you like, you don't, that's not boulder. Like you suck. Like you're
Of
an idiot.
course.
You didn't go to the top. He just made the point that it's hilarious to call something to the lip that happened before. Like Sharma did that to the lip and jumped off. But then how does that get the name evolution? I just thought that was kind of funny. You know, just
Yeah.
more history and naming shenanigans.
Yeah, totally. And but there's truth to it, you know, like what are you actually sending, and like having that I think it's cool when people can have that inner like, okay, well, like what's more? Because I know everyone's like does problems to lip and they're like, like how do we top this thing out? How do we make it pure? And I think like it's cool that he listened to that. And you know, it was not so much for me to bring that up to discredit people who are doing evolution to the lip, because there's like a lot of real reasons why you wouldn't go past the lip, but it's cool that he did, where for him he was like, nah dude, like I need to go to the top, you know. And that's something that's really important to listen to. um the Ascent, styles of the Ascent. I think these are just random notes that I wrote out. Bouldering doesn't need a lot of rules. It's so simple. Keep it simple. I think that was really cool that he said something like that, where like for him, the simplicity of like, it's clear that he was more so a boulderer than really anything else, but highballing and free soloing was like very important to him. And, you know, it's also very important to me. And simplicity is extremely important in climbing, right? Like I said before, it is an expression and it's arbitrary. So when it's arbitrary, you want to keep it simpler, right? Like we don't want to have these crazy rules and like all these things. And you guys kind of went into that. You went into the controversies of safety in like bouldering and what keeps it actually bouldering. I thought that was a really interesting conversation. I've definitely like experimented and thought about blow up air mattresses, like huge ones that they use in like circuses or whatever, like nets for safety. But like, yeah, at what point is it bouldering? And you know, I think that was just a fun conversation to listen to, and I think you guys both had really good points there. This is a note that I thought was really cool. You guys are talking about the fly, which is old Dave Graham line that was bolted, and then he decided to do it without a rope. He free soloed it, and he said straight up that it was a better style. He said, he didn't even question it. He said, I wanted to do the fly in a better style. And I was like, whoa, like that's controversial to say that, you know, bouldering it, free soloing it is a better style. And probably a lot of people would disagree with you. But he just said that simpler expression is better, period. In climbing, if it's simpler, it's better. And I love that proud statement of saying, you know, like I'm taking out all of the distractions. I'm just climbing for myself. I'm just climbing to push myself. I'm just climbing because I wanted to push myself and see what was difficult and like what was a cleaner way of doing it. And he decided to do it regardless of what fear he had, regardless of what consequences could have happened. He was like, this is better and I'm going to do it the better way. And it's almost like inarguable in a lot of ways. I think that the noise that I hear from people is more so it's not worth it. But like, is worth really going to tell you what's better or worse? You know, that's really the question that I think I had for just the community. It's like, yeah, it could be worse. I'm not going to argue with you, and there's more consequences. I could die and like all this stuff. But, you know, clearly people like Jason and I and a handful of other people out there are looking for better, you know, like what's the best style, regardless of all these safety things. You know, obvious, we're not dumb. Like obviously we're the ones who are on the borderline of dying, you know, but like we know we know what that's like, but we're just arguing that better style is worth it, you know.
It's funny. My next note was about the fly, and that whole thing where he just said it was a better style. I don't remember how I reacted on the podcast, but I feel like I was just sucked in and convinced too. Like you said, like that's controversial, and now that you point it out, I see what you're saying. But I think that I was just like, oh yeah, of course, dude. And because my note is now when he walked up to the fly, he was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna do it without a rope. Like it wasn't even like a question. He didn't go like, yeah, like is it, you know, should I do this? Whatever. It's just like, of course. Right. And that's that classic thing that we're talking about where Jason saw the boulder. He's like, well, of course we have to go to the top of evolution. It's like, of course I can just climb the fly without a rope. Like, what do you mean? Like it's almost, there's not a lot of argument there. He's not posting a bunch of reasoning. It just was so obvious to him, which I think is cool. And I mean, I do think it's a better style. And now that I think about it, like, yeah, is that like calling Dave Graham out and saying like, Dave, why'd you put 2 bolts in that? Right. Like, not really. That just, Jason does not seem to be, he didn't say like, see Dave, like I'm doing it a cooler way.
Right.
But the other thing that I had on the fly was how, I don't know if I said this in the podcast or if I heard this somewhere else. He just kind of casually talked about, yeah, I just pitched a tent and I'm just going to do it. And like that just commitment and that knowing that he was going to do it, especially because at the time that was tied for the hardest climb in America. It's 14D, wow. And there was another one that was 14D, or is it 14C? I don't know. I just know it was like the hardest climb in America, hardest sport climb in America at the time.
Jeez.
And he was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. So I pitched a tent here and then I'm going to do it without a rope. And just like, think about what that is at the time. Could you imagine someone saying, whatever the hardest climb is, not only am I going to just have the confidence that I'm just going to show up and do it, but I'm going to do it without a rope. And the fly is not like death defying. I know it's not like the craziest thing, but still, again, to shift your mind, like to be like, I'm just going to do it and just pitch my tent and then do it in this style that I think is better, shows what a unique approach he had, how authentic he was. And damn, it just makes me, I mean, Tim, you're better at this, but yeah, it's just a call to everyone out there to be more authentic, to like follow your intuition instead of just doing what everyone else is doing. And that's kind of how new stuff gets done, right? If you do what everyone else is doing, you're not going to do new stuff. And then we're not going to bring you on the podcast to talk about the cool shit you did. So yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, dude. Oh, so significant what you just said. That's awesome. Yeah, I wrote a note here. I love how quickly he answered, when you asked for what he looks for in climbing. That was like a big thing. When you asked what he looks for in climbing, it was very like kind of immediate for him. He was like, well, like I look for just the like stuff that inspires me, like yada, yada, yada. I was like, that's so cool that he just like knows that answer, because I think for me, it would depend and it would take a little bit longer but at the same time, if you ask me like, where would I put all of my, like what climb would make me put all my energy into it? The answer would be similar to all the answers that he gave you, right? Because it's like, for him, he only cares about the stuff that would make him put all the energy into, right? Because there's some climbs where you're like, I don't know, like it's not that worth it. It's not worth it in terms of consequences, not worth it in terms of physical effort, mental effort. It's not worth it in terms of like the training that I have to do to it for it. But there are climbs that don't even make any logistical sense that suddenly become super worth it for me, and I think that was really an interesting, like deeper layer conversation.
Well, give yourself 20 years of climbing, 20 more years of climbing and hashing out in your head. And I'm sure you'll have more clearer thoughts. I mean, it's what we do here is really by having to speak about it, think it through, it clarifies things. And, Jason has been thinking about it for a long time and it shows. Yeah. That's why we want to talk to him.
Yeah, for sure. I love your question about the significance of sharing art as opposed to just doing the art. This is, again, a very controversial topic, but the point is if you think no one is going to do it, sorry, that was his answer. But sorry, the point there that you were asking was like, is it important to you to share what you're doing, to like film it, document it, and then like share it because you're doing crazy shit that like people aren't going to do necessarily? And, I thought that was really interesting because I know a lot of people who do crazy shit and like don't film it, don't share it. And like for them, because it takes away from the experience of doing. And I respect that, but for me, obviously I filmed Focus and like wanted to share it. And I'm that type of person who like, if I see art or expression or like something crazy, I definitely have to share it. And I love Jason's reason for it because I never really figured it out for me. And I always thought like, I just share because like, it's just worth sharing, like people are interested. And for him, it was more so that no one else is going to do it. Like he kind of just like goes and sees these challenges and he's like, wow, that looks crazy and it seems possible. But, maybe he's like, wait a second. If I don't do it, who is going to do it? Right? If I don't do it, who is going to do it? But everybody's going to look at these climbs and say someone should do it, right? Everybody feels that. Everybody looks at El Cap and says, wonder if that's free soloable, right? But everyone sees that stuff. Like everyone sees Too Big to Flail. It's like, I wonder if someone has the balls to like go up and do this thing. And the point is if you think it's possible, you better do it. If you think it's even remotely possible, you better be the kid putting the shoes on. You better be wrapping down that line, right? Because nobody else is going to. That's like the whole point of life. That's like the whole point of climbing, like period, is to find the things that are cool because we all think this stuff is cool. But some people could do those things and those people should be the ones doing those things. And we want to see it. Right? Like everybody wants to see the Freakazoid do the Freakazoid things. So let's film it. And like everyone wants to see it, man. Like that's the point to me. And so I think that was the point to Jason. I thought that was just so cool to like open up that conversation for him. For me, that was extremely significant because I'm very similar in that like I question, and like the only thing people give me shit for really is like, well, if it's really pure, like why did you film it? Like why did you get paid? Like why did you all do stuff? And it's like those are kind of like byproducts of doing something that's cool. But like let's face it, to do something cool was just for me, and I wouldn't have risked my life for a camera ever. Like it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I don't care how much money.
I definitely was like, Tim, just remember, like, just because there's cameras and production, you can just back off. Well, now you have to go find some cool FA and call it Freakazoid, or I am the Freakazoid. Dude, it is heavy what you just said about that idea of someone has to do it. I just remember my dad always talking about, he'd like always like be involved in some lawsuit or something with a whole group of people. We were like farmers, and there was just, I remember him being the chairman of some group of farmers. We all got sued for water rights. This is very off topic, but the reason why I bring it up is because I just remember him saying, like, sometimes like there's just this vacuum and you look around and you're like, God damn it, is someone going to do this, or is it going to have to be me? And it's like, you want to be that kind of person that's like, maybe only I can do this. I mean, in some ways, like that's what you look for in life. And even like a really cool thing would be to do that in climbing is, and I think Jason exemplifies that. It's like at that time, it's clear that like there was other people who could climb Evolution. People were trying, but like he's the one who did it. So there's something special about him in that moment. Now look, that boulder sits for another year, 5 years, 10 years, where someone's going to come along and do it. I'm not saying that he was, somehow chosen to do that climb, but like, that's the cool shit when like you find that connection of like, what is unique and special about you, and then you showcase it. And that was kind of focus for you, right? I mean, it's like, it's not like other people can't do it, but you're called to this and then you rise to the occasion. And the whole idea of sharing an art is just something that, I mean, I think about it. It's a selfish thing too. And I mean, maybe it speaks to some of the reasons why I like climbing is the aspect of sharing experiences with people. Even when you go off and do something alone, like, I don't know, there's something about creating media around it that I think is beautiful. And because maybe it's because I've been so inspired over time for lines because of the media that was created. And, Jason, that video of Evolution was, I mean, I'm gonna fucking say it again. Evolution's probably my favorite experience, the best climb I've done in my life, despite it not being the hardest. And it's because of that thing I've talked about where I walked up to that boulder. I had no idea what it was. And I was just like, do people climb this? And I watched that video, and it's this intense video. And I talked about this in the pod where, it really captures that savageness of Bishop when it's cold, it's sharp, it's kind of miserable, you're scared, it's tall, and then you push through it all and do it. And so if he hadn't have put that video out, I don't like, if I had just stumbled upon that piece of rock on my own, maybe it's not right off the road. I don't know. Just like, there's something about the history and seeing it that I think is relevant. So I just wanted to hear, how he thought about it, because I don't know.
So cool. No, you're right, man. It's exactly what you're saying. Like if there was no Evolution video from Jason specifically, you would walk up and interpret it yourself, right? And depending on your level of interpretation, which is not Jason's style of interpretation, it would be a different interpretation, right? And like, that's what art is. Jason interpreted it one way, and it allowed us to interpret it his way. And that's amazing, right? Because it was authentic, it was raw, it was savage, it was like he embraced all of it. And not everyone is going to do that, And I think like that could be said about a lot of climbing out there. Like the fact is you're right. Evolution probably would have gotten put down in the next couple of years after that. Maybe not, but probably. And it's not the point. The point is that once he did it, then more people were going to do it, right? And that's the same thing with any groundbreaking achievement. And climbing is this double thing where it's like constant mental groundbreaking achievements, but also physical groundbreaking achievements. And like the things that make climbing news, or the things that should make climbing news, in my opinion, are the ones that really challenge people. And like people are forced to interpret life and climbing in their own ways to make sure that achievements happen so that other people can interpret it that way, right? The point is to share that interpretation so that other people can interpret it one way, because if you hadn't, then they wouldn't have interpreted it that way, right? Yeah. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah. So thanks to Jason for kind of crafting that experience for me. That is one of the more meaningful ones in my life. And the last thing my last note on Jason is we talked about real climbing a little bit, and quote unquote real climbing, and we're just defining it. It's not real climbing. It's just kind of how he chose to list it. And there was this element that I thought about where when we first started talking about it, it's like, okay, like, real climbing is, you don't care about grades and you just go and you have like your moment in nature. And, just this really purist, like kind of hardcore dirtbag mentality, which I really grew up around when I was a kid. And climbing has changed. Uh, and that's not to say that's not still part of climbing, part of my climbing. But there's lots of facets of climbing, and climbing has changed because there's gyms and big gyms, and new people learning about climbing through gyms. And something that just I thought was so interesting is how, if I had told you about Jason's career as a quote unquote dirtbag and the time he climbed in, what he thought about real climbing, you could have really pigeonholed him in this very narrow way. But then the fact that he goes indoors and sees it as this completely new abstract place where he can make holds that have nothing to do with outdoors and make all sorts of quote unquote silly holds and just let his creativity roam free, and then be involved in gym design. And it just really was important to me because I mean, I try a bridge. Sometimes I remember feeling guilty about really enjoying indoor climbing, yeah, just honestly, just enjoying indoor climbing because I came from this era where that would be taboo and it would be embarrassing to talk about indoors being fun. But I love quote unquote real climbing too, and it made me feel good to hear someone who is literally pitched his tent outside of a climb outdoors to have that experience. But then when he brought those skills to share in the community, it came out as amazing interest, pushed the forefront of what holds could be. Same thing with gym design, and just it really speaks to his depth of love for climbing and his ability to express himself in whatever different domain. Again, just this authenticity. I don't know. I was impressed. I was really impressed.
I love it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I love
That's
this
all I
note.
got.
That was definitely my next note as well, talking about real climbing, because he made a big point about it. It was real climbing for him was a video series. He said that he's
Yeah. A very recent YouTube series that he's got
cool.
a couple
Yeah,
episodes out on. Yeah.
definitely gonna watch that. I'm gonna share two more notes because I have way too many. And I think a lot of these are significant, but they're all on the podcast. These are just me, kind of just like I listened to it, and these are just thoughts that were interesting to me. And I'll share a couple of the things that were just like basically interesting. He just said, throw yourself at the climb and listen. I really like that, where he just really believes that he hasn't found everything before he blames. He really believes in his climbing that he hasn't found everything possible, and he doesn't blame any lack of skill or ability. He said something really interesting where he says, mutate the body to the moves that you're trying, and your body will learn. Just mutate it. Just like let your body do those things. I love that. You kind of asked what climbing was about, and you guys just had a really good discussion there. Power screams just come, but because he allows the emotions to help, which was really significant. That was the question that I asked. And I think I asked that question because, yeah, it doesn't seem like he's like just power screaming all the time, but when he does, it works. And when he does, it's really significant. And he does more than most people do. And I thought that was like really interesting. Like to me, that was something that struck me as Jason, was how emotionally he climbs. And obviously it helps. Inspiration first is something that Jared Roth talked about as well when it comes to like hold design, but Jason uses that in wall design. So when it comes to the climbing gyms and like making stuff, it was inspiration based, right? It wasn't just like what's the best utility, like what's the best for this or whatever. He just like looked, and he was saying that climbing gym walls are like really hard because buildings are, you and I have run into conversations about this, but like, poles are everywhere. Like there's just weird layouts and whatnot. And like, for him, he just tried to do the best that he could in that moment. And it's very, very similar to his climbing. It was cool to state that comp setting is repetitive. I've tried to say that a lot in the past, but he said it way better. And he just kind of made a point that you can't test other aspects. So for him, it's like not that interesting because they're always testing the same aspect. And like, that's not what rock climbing is. But going back to what you're talking about, real climbing, I just thought that something he had said right before that was his skill is that he knows how to enjoy climbing. That's a skill, right? And real climbing is for him, like the idea of real climbing isn't to discredit anybody, but for him was really just to preserve an original experience that he has with real climbing. And so that's joy, inspiration, challenge, fear, just fun. I think like all those things are for him real climbing, and probably are just real climbing. If you did want to make it an objective statement what real climbing is, you probably include a lot of these things. And he's just really good at enjoying that real climbing. And I think that's a huge underrated technique, is to enjoy it, right? Because then you're not embracing all of the good and the bad, right? If you're just critiquing it all the time, and you're critiquing your experience all the time and judging yourself and judging others, then are we really enjoying real climbing all the time, right? I thought that was really interesting. And the last thing that I wanted to share was kind of a significant thing that you brought up about gymnastics. You brought up that in gymnastics, there is a best way to do something, period, right? That's how you guys train. There's like, here, if you're going to do this technique, this is the best way to do it, and do it 100,000 times, and you're going to get really good at it, right? In climbing, there's something similar to that, but it applies differently from person to person, style to style. So the best approach comes from training the mind, right? If you just look at it through and through, the best way to train a climber, in my opinion, but also just an experience, is to train their mind, right? Because their mind allows them to express their style as the best, and what they think is the best for that moment. And I've just been proven wrong. I think the way that I've interpreted this is like, I've competed a lot. I've climbed with a lot of very, very talented climbers, and I've not been proven what the best way is. Now, I can find optimal for myself really easily. Like nowadays, I kind of do know, and like I'm sure you know, a lot of time, like what just works, right? But when you say, like, if you were to explain to me out of 10 different rock climbs, like what is the best way to do each thing, and like what is the best beta, what is the best way to operate the beta, and what am I doing? And I told you the exact same thing. I was like, what's the best way for me to do it? You asked 10 other professional rock climbers. We're all telling you different things, right? And for me, that's, I think, why I think about just like, what is the right way to train? What is the best way to train? And it's similar to gymnastics, where like there is a best way to train, but it's probably more in the mind. It's probably more mental than it is physical. It's not so much like exact techniques and whatnot, but it's how you do those techniques. It's how you believe in those techniques. It's how your mind, it's your opinions. It's how your opinions say that's not correct when it might be correct, right? It's really sculpting the mind, I think. And the power of the mind is the power in climbing, more so than just like physical things. I've been proven that countless times.
Dude, I mean, I love that theme of our podcast, is focusing on the mind. I literally was just doing a pre-interview with someone who will come on the podcast. And he literally kind of like started off by saying, if one more person asks me about like the sets and reps, he's like, I'm just going to lose it. Like, I am not going to talk about that. And I was like, don't worry. don't worry. You've come to the right place, man. Yeah, okay. I want to put a pin in our chat about Jason. It's funny because I didn't realize we were going to go so long, but it's fun. I knew he was a legend, and I had my thoughts about him, but I don't think I quite realized how big a deal it was going to be for me and what we were going to take away. And so I just was really happy about that podcast. I'm glad that, it had such a big impact on you too.
Yeah.
And
go listen to it. Just my overall summary of that is, I think it's clear to me that Jason really lived as a climber. I'm sure a lot of people have, but I like that podcast was about that. I like that podcast was about philosophies and like really deep diving on that stuff. So hopefully that's what you guys took away from my notes and just like my thoughts on it. Because I think that's the stuff that's truly important, right? And like when I get asked for coaching a lot, people end up just asking me like, how do I shape my philosophy so that it's like yours? And I'm like, that's a really interesting conversation to have, right? And like, it sounds like you don't want coaching. It sounds like you want a conversation. And that's how I approach a lot of my coaching with people. And Jason just did that in a podcast, and I think that was phenomenal. So yeah, go listen. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, this is how you go from, I mean, that's how he went from good to great, right? I mean, like, seriously, it's like
100%.
He's unique. And I think that we all want to be like that. We all want to like find out what makes us special and then showcase it. All right, dude, good one on Jason. Yeah, on this mental idea, it kind of makes me think of the classroom that we did recently. So, me and Tim have been talking about this. We launched Patreon, and one of the big things that we were doing with Patreon is that we're we're doing a once a month classroom where we bring listeners in and we have a Q&A. We thought about maybe bringing topics in if there weren't enough questions, but boy, did those questions just take up all our time. We went way too long. Dude. They were so good
awesome.
though.
It was so fun.
And, just a big thanks to everyone who came out and our supporters and the good questions. And, that the reason why I bring it up is that question we got from Michael around sequencing and how to understand if you are progressing as a climber in ways other than just your physical metrics around the hangboard. Because especially when you get higher up in grades, it's not always so clear. Like, are you really getting better? And what was interesting though about getting to do this classroom is that I had written out this whole thing about answering that question, but then as we dug deeper with Michael, like that wasn't the exact question. And like that's what was really fun is like, I'm like, okay, Michael, like, did that answer your question? He didn't say no, but he's like, actually that second sentence around sequencing, that was what I was really interested in. I was like, oh, okay, let's talk about that. And I thought that was that part was a really good discussion. I really enjoyed. So I will probably put up some teaser or something on here of like a little bit of what we were talking about, but just had a blast and really appreciate everyone's support. So if you want to join us next month, I'm not sure when this will come out before we have the next one, I think, but we haven't picked the date. So I'm just going to do some kind of editing magic and put in the date in 3, 2, 1. There you go. That's it. That's when we'll do our next one. And if you want to join us, go and sign up for Patreon. This is the Let's Effing Go tier, which is our little bit higher tier, so that you can really meet us and tell us about how to apply our principles to your specific question, your specific issue, which went better than I thought it would. But if that's not for you, you could still support us with the it's the spotter tier. That's help us out, you guys, with the spotter tier. Just if you appreciate what we're doing here, and we have other stuff in the works for all the tiers, like merch and discount codes. It's hard to get it all done. That's why we need some support, because we need to hire more people, pay people like Brendan more money to do the behind the scenes, because it's a lot of work. We love it, no complaints. But all of your support is appreciated, and thanks for making that first classroom so fun. Anything for you to say, Tim? Did you have as much fun as I did?
Dude, for sure I had a lot of fun. I literally came off the call and I was like, I told Michaela, I was like, I could have been on that for like 3 or 4 hours straight. And she was like, please don't do that. But the classrooms for us are going to be evolving constantly a lot. They're super easy way of just like networking with everybody and like getting a little bit deeper than you can, getting a lot deeper than you can on the podcast for sure, because it's, back and forth with people. It's very similar to a coaching call that I have with like a lot of different people. But I think it's just more fun, to be honest. It's more broad. It's like a lot more discussion based than like, we're just exactly trying to give you the answers, but we are, right? And I'll say, the last thing I'll say is it is the cheapest possible way to get high level coaching. I will tell you that right now. It is the cheapest possible way to get high level coaching. It's only $25 a month to support us, but you do get over an hour's worth of Josh and I giving you we think really deep about this stuff and we go really into it. So hopefully if you guys were on that last classroom, you guys, felt that way. If not, give us feedback for the next classroom. But otherwise, I think we were pretty stoked on just being able to share the perspectives and talk deep climbing.
Yeah, Tim, you literally, as soon as we ended the call, you texted me, that was so much fun. I think everyone had a blast. It was definitely, I don't want to say relaxed, but it wasn't a lecture. But now hearing you say that it's similar to your coaching calls, I can see why you wanted to call it a classroom, because it may not be one-on-one for, we were at least an hour and a half, and it may not be exactly that, because we're trying to address everyone's issues instead of just one person's. But that is kind of like that classroom dynamic where you have a teacher, you can ask them anything, but there's a handful of you. But the good part about that is that oftentimes people ask questions that are really helpful for you, or maybe they asked the question you didn't want to ask. You were too embarrassed or whatever, and now you get it live right there. And also there's all the previous recordings as those stack up. And yeah, Tim, this is still a bit of an experiment for us. I'll say that that was so fun that I have a hunch we're going to do a lot more. And, we did it on Zoom. We'll see what the next format is as we start getting more people. It may be better to do it in a different way than Zoom, but actually that was fantastic. So Tim, enough of that. I don't know. That's any other announcements you want to make, or should we move on to our topic of the day that we don't have a ton of time for? But yeah.
Yeah, no, let's move on. I have a pro tip if I can just jump straight into it.
Ooh, let's hear your pro tip, dog.
Nice. Well, the topic of the day is maybe I'll just explain the topic of the day because I think it's kind of fascinating to me. But the topic of the day is why people like board climbing so much, and I kind of wrote in parentheses for my note for this topic, more than regular climbing. I'll just say that. And I think there's a secret there that I would like to deep dive, and I don't think it's going to take that much time to talk about this topic, so I'm kind of okay with it. But my pro tip is as well as working hard to add good habits to your climbing training or life, like footwork drills, breathwork drills, hangboarding, working out, just watching climbing, like all the things that we always talk about, as well as working hard to add good habits, remove easy bad habits from your life, from climbing, from training. What could that be? Like sugary, fatty, processed foods, sleep a little bit earlier, watch one less episode of whatever you're watching. For me, those are a lot of life things. I would just kind of like pick apart a lot of habits that I have that are like pretty bad in my life. I am notoriously bad at falling asleep. I'll just stay and just watch and watch and watch like whatever I'm watching. So, lately I've been a lot better at just being like, okay, that's enough. Like that's one more that you were going to do. Don't do that one. I eat a lot of junk food. Try to stop eating junk food, stuff like that.
Still has an 8-pack. Yeah. Keep going.
And then like in the climbing, grip less on the wall. Don't give up as often. Sequence before you climb and get better at it. Don't get so lazy with the habits that probably are really easy for you. I would say smoke less and drink less. If you do partake in those types of things, those are really, really easy things that add up over time. There's a lot of compounding bad habits that in the moment might be like maybe not so significant to you, or it's like, it's okay. Like that was not that bad. It's not going to affect me. But just the idea of those bad habits compounding can be quite significant. So get on top of those bad habits, get rid of the easiest ones in your life. And that's my pro tip.
Yeah. One thing about smoking and drinking is that somehow it seems to be good for you in Europe. I don't know what it is, but if you're in Europe, smoking and drinking is okay.
But we're not in Europe.
We're not in Europe. But if you are in Europe, you lucky dog. Anyways, real quick, Tim, if you're watching TV or laptop late, that's a bunch of blue light, and that's what's hurting your sleep, man. I wear hilarious blue blocker glasses. You can look them up. They're like orange glasses. If I'm going to watch TV or read on my Kindle late, that'll help you not get blue light. Because I know a lot of people who are like, man, I have a hard time falling asleep. I'm like, you're holding a fucking iPad. Like it's midnight. Get off your iPad. It's blue light. I don't know if you've looked into that stuff, but I can go.
I definitely have. Yeah, I don't have and I think that I didn't do that because I didn't have a problem falling asleep, but I have noticed that like deep sleep is just like much more, it's much less present when I'm looking at stuff later. And so I might get a blue light, but I might just like make a rule to like not watch stuff.
Blue light is bad. You don't want blue light. You want to block
glasses,
out.
I mean. Sorry. Yeah.
So I'm just going to do a pitch for, there's a book called Built to Move by Juliet and Kelly Starrett. And I know them. I'm part of their nonprofit. So I'm kind of talking my book, but it's about their book. And it's all about these kind of like basic habits that you should do, whether they've coached gold medal Olympic athletes. They've coached, the 49ers. And so these are things that are they're very basic, but it's kind of like, you all think you're immune and it doesn't matter, but some of the things are just, don't get a lot of light at night. One of the reasons why I wake up at dawn basically and go for a long walk is if you get 8,000 steps a day or 8 to 10,000 steps a day, it really helps you fall asleep. It helps you get deeper sleep. And the more sunlight you get during the day, the easier it is to fall asleep, even if you have light at night from TV, because it's about basically like the delta or the difference in how much sunlight you get during the day versus at night. So, if you're out climbing outside all day long in the sun and then you come back and watch TV, your it's not that big a deal because you've spent so much freaking time in the sun that your body's like, okay, no, we know this is nighttime though. But if you're indoors all day long doing a podcast, looking at a screen with Tim on the other side, then your body's just like, I don't know if it's morning or night. I don't know. It's like, it's always the same. And so that's a whole cascade. I don't know. I don't want to get, I'm into that shit, but it's because I was going to say it's because I'm old, but it's not. I started this stuff, probably at your age because I was just into it. And
you just care. Yeah.
It helps, awesome. Dude. It just does. I don't know. You can, if you really want to, actually, it makes me think of what we were talking about in the classroom. It's like details matter. It's all in the details. And it's like, it does all compound. Like, if you get another 30 minutes of quality sleep each night, it doesn't matter until you've done it for 5 years. And that does matter. That may be the difference for you. So, yeah. And that's what we were talking about with that sequencing, just like sequencing. When you had first used that word, I like didn't really understand what it meant. I think I was like, oh, left hand goes here, right hand goes here. But then when we dove into about all the micro beta and how to figure out micro beta, that was one of my favorite parts of that classroom. So
nice.
Anyways,
awesome. Do you have a pro tip?
Yeah, it's funny. I like totally forgot to prepare them, but I have a list of them. So I looked and, so I was, my pro tip is around hangboarding. Cause I just started, and I was doing one arm hangs. And I think I talked about in the last podcast where life was going well. I was focused on mandala sit and I struggle with this left hand crimp in the stand. And so I was like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do one arm hangs. I've never done them before. And I noticed that my left hand was weaker than my right hand. And I was like, what's going on here? I actually think of my left hand crimping. I almost think sometimes my left hand feels better on crimps. And then what I noticed is that it just felt weird to hang one arm. And I realized that I wasn't pulling my shoulder blade like down in, like I wasn't depressing my scapula. So like if you reach up, maybe I'll have to put this on YouTube or Instagram. Right? If you reach up, like, your shoulder blade kind of comes up, your whole shoulder comes up. And then when you do a pull up, like ideally what happens is your shoulder blade goes down, like your whole shoulder drops down and then you bend your arm, right? It's like your shoulder and back engage and then you bend your arm. And when you're doing a hangboard, you should be engaged in your shoulder. Maybe your arm's not bent, but your shoulder should be engaged. And I realized that my left shoulder wasn't really doing what it was supposed to. And as a result, my hand felt weak. My fingers weren't weaker, but my shoulder wasn't in the right position. So I just started doing on bigger holds and a bar, like really focusing on kind of, they call them like scap pull-ups is what it's often called. And sure enough, not only in some ways, it was just as simple as kind of warming up that movement and then doing the one arm hang. But I was talking to another buddy and he said that he struggled with the same thing and that he had to really regress and that it was really helping him. And it wasn't that I couldn't engage my shoulder. It was just somehow it was a disconnect there. And all of a sudden my left one arm hang shot right up to be the same as my right one arm hang. And I know it's a really specific tip, but it's just something to watch out for if you do a one arm hang and one side feels weak. Maybe it's your shoulders, not your fingers.
Dude, that is a very underrated tip. I think the tip that I hear from that most is form is just a lot more important for like getting the correct amount of recruitment than you think. But also for specifically engaging your fingers and hands, I think a lot of people have like a lot of misconceptions about that stuff. And working from your shoulders first is a great place to start. And also that tip that your friend had where it's regressing to find the correct form is really, really important. If you're like struggling hangboarding, if you're struggling hangboarding with one arm, go to the bar first and like figure out what the best way to hang is, like to get the most power and like equalize your body. And for me, there's actually a lot of core engagement. There's a lot of shoulder engagement in hangboarding in general. And then with the one arm, it's like usually that my fingers don't fail. It's usually that my shoulder fails, by the way. That scap engagement for me is really, really difficult. And I usually am like pretty good at that because I can do a lot of one arm pull-ups. So the engagement is usually easy, but hanging in that engaged position or I guess like that shoulder retracted position for like a long time is just difficult, if you don't do it a lot. But it picks up pretty quickly. I think I found that like just doing one arm hangs on good holds, but engaging the scap in the correct way just got my one arm hangs on smaller grips better too. So a secondary pro tip, just like hang on the jug and then just engage the scap with one arm. It's really, really difficult to do it for a long period of time. Great pro tip. Can I jump in to the
Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry.
just, I no, I do want, I just, wait, hold on, let me, I kind of blanked for a second. Oh yeah, yeah. This is like what the training is for, right? To like expose this stuff often. Like it gives you
Totally.
this isolated way to work on things. And I'm not saying you can't find that out sometimes in your climbing, but like actually this leads right into board climbing is just reducing the amount of variables that you have to figure out what's going wrong. Like maybe if I was doing it outdoors, it's like, oh, well, it was hot that day on this rock. And so I felt like I was slipping. So that's why my grip was weak. I just wouldn't know. But it's like
Right, right.
temperature controlled, same hold, same day. Like it's kind of like, okay, so what's going on here? Like, let's reduce the variables. And, you know, I'm going to hand it back to you, Tim, to talk about why board climbing is so attractive, you know, compared to a lot of other climbing. And my argument is that I think it's because it's reduced variables. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's, yeah, very like, that's a more of like the overall topic that we're going to talk about is reduced variables. But I also, sorry, I'm going to go back to what you were just saying before,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you said something really interesting that, you know, your left hand feels stronger than your right hand sometimes on the wall. And that's actually a huge thing that we want to dive into as well, right? It's like we have feelings, but I love what you're saying is like that training, when you isolate the actual things that are going on, teaches you a lot. And so, of course, you can feel good somewhere else, but once you learn what actual things are happening and like the objectivity of it, you learn a lot more and you can teach yourself better. The reason why I want to jump into this topic so quickly was because I actually want to just state really quickly before we get into like why board climbing is attractive for people, and probably more than like other forms of climbing, that the vice versa also applies. I know climbers, and I know a lot of you guys are listening and you're like, fucking hate board climbing. Like I hate the feeling of moonboarding. Well, then the other thing is going to apply for you. So just take everything that we say and just flip it exactly the other way. And what I mean by that is some climbers may really enjoy the nuance and the complexity and the ability to be creative in order to solve, and hate that straightforward movement. And that's really common in youth climbing, by the way, right? Because youth climbers are just weaker, right? A lot of youth climbers are just weaker, just have less muscle, just have less strength. But if you're, so just kind of target yourself if you're listening to this in whatever net you are. If you're a climber who enjoys that more straightforward movement because there's less variables, then this everything that we're talking about is probably more targeted for you, because I think there's a lot more people like that. But it can be exactly the opposite way around, where you're super nuanced and you're like, you love finding toe hooks and drop knees and turning your body and stuff like that. And that was actually me the first time I hopped on the moonboard, and I hated the moonboard. And now I enjoy the moonboard a lot. It's still not for me like what I would go for other than other climbing. But the only reason I would do that is just to gain the exact strengths. But okay, Josh, I'm going to hand it straight back to you because I just wanted to give that other
Yeah.
side.
No, that's a good point, is that you just gotta acknowledge whatever you're really attracted to or really not attracted to, and understand why, and because perhaps there's something to learn, there's lessons to learn there. And you know, I guess I want to dive in more into this idea of variables. And like you said, something that I both agree with and don't agree with, where you're saying that the moon board or board climbing in general is just kind of very straightforward, and you know, people don't like it because there's not as many variables, often youth climbers, because they're typically weaker because they haven't gone through puberty, or they're just don't have the time to build the strength yet, they haven't had the decade of experience. And I agree, on the surface it's like, yeah, I mean, there's just one foothold, so what are you gonna do? Like, you gotta do it, like you gotta use that foot. Or maybe there's two. It's like, well, you could hand foot or you could use that foothold, but there's literally nothing else. And I had that same thought about it, but then when I really went deep on it, because there's fewer variables, it forces you, when you get stopped, to really go into micro granular details. And I think that, let's say you're outdoors and there's a million variables, and you could just say, hey, these holds don't feel so good, I'm going to wait until it's cold, right? Like you could say, like, I'm going to wait until there's better weather, and so now the holds will feel better. Or you could say, hey, like, I don't like toe hooks, but I could use this foot over here and rock onto it instead of the toe hook. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that oftentimes when you have, say, 20 variables, you can just choose, and you should choose, quote unquote, the lowest hanging fruit, right? It's like, okay, I would get the most ROI by just switching my beta, or waiting for it to be colder because it's 90 degrees right now. But in the moon board, you have 4 variables, 3 variables or something. And as a result, you have to just say, okay, like it's a tow hook. And there's not a lot of tow hooks on the moon board, but let's just say it was a tow hook. Now it's like, okay, every little micro detail has to be assessed. And all of a sudden the whole world opens up of details. And I guess it showed me how deep I can go into a variable. And I think that was a big unlock for me. And I was talking about this. Well, I was talking about this with a guest that's coming on, but it also makes me think of what I learned from David Fitzgerald, is that I had kind of just said, okay, small holds, put in a bucket and said like, I don't know, I need stronger fingers. But then talking to someone with quote unquote, some of the strongest fingers out there, it was not just stronger fingers. He went so detailed on every little bit of how to hold a hold, where to put your body. And it's a good lesson to learn as to how micro you can go onto something so I don't know, so obvious, like this, the sequencing is obvious or whatever. And we went over that in the classroom because we literally talked about moonboard climb. And, it's like, well, this is where the right hand goes. This is where the left hand goes. And this is where the finish hold is. And then I went through my process of all my failures. And, it's like, okay, this layer, this layer, this layer, this layer. And it was all with the same holds, the same temps, the same move, but I just, it's like 10 layers deep on that one variable. And so I find that really attractive to get to really test your ability to go deep on granular on a specific move, rather than kind of the opposite, where there's always a different variable that you could optimize, where you're forced to choose one and say, okay, right hand's going to go up. How do I do that? And so, that's why I find it attractive. I really love that.
That's really interesting. I think I'm going to go ahead and say that I doubt that a lot of people have that experience, and I'll explain why I think that. But what you're saying, I do want to talk about what you're saying first, because I think it's fascinating. You're talking about operational mechanics versus like sequential mechanics, and those are like just the differences. And like, climbing that has a bunch of variables, like even just featured walls, bigger holds, like holds that have more friction, holds that have more variable, like that provides the allowance of more sequential decisions, right? Like instead of changing how you use something, you change how you do something, versus like, okay, there's just this hold, this hold, this foothold, this foothold, and you go to that hold, right? So the only things you should change are how you operate. That's great. I think the reason why I said that I think less people have that experience, and there's a fair amount of people who can have that experience, but here's that keyword there. I think you can have an experience because you're really strong already, because you're really good, because you do notice those things. And I would argue that a lot of people who maybe aren't there yet go to the board and get immediately shut down. So I think that it's really interesting where maybe there is an allowance, maybe like board climbing should have a minimum allowance of like how much you already know in terms of that sequential operation or that sequential mechanic. And then you can get on the board and then you can use it to learn. Or you just have to have that mindset where you show up and you're like, look, if I can't do something, it either is going to be because I literally can't do something, like I can't do this move, or because I'm not doing this move properly. And I think once you tap that out, then you just move on. Then you're just like, okay, I can't do this problem anymore. I think that's really interesting where like a lot of people have that like one of, X amount of experiences where they go on the board, right? They like put a board problem up and they're like, okay, cool. Like I just shit on this board problem. I feel great today. Or they just literally look, so far away from doing this move. And then they go one of two routes where they're either like try again, and then figure out just one thing that they weren't doing well, but with the same beta, or they just don't try it because they believe that they cannot do this problem anymore, right? And I think that's really interesting. But that's all just playing with the mind, right? It's all just constantly playing with the mind with like so why are you doing it? Like what's fun for you? What's the attractive part, right? And it's cool that you found that little piece is attractive. But I would say that if people can find that, they will almost always have fun on the board. Like if people can have that mindset, if people can find that mindset, they're almost always going to have tons of fun on the board. But my point in bringing up why board climbing is attractive for people in general is because of the layer kind of before that, which is just like easy success. right? It's easier to succeed on things that have less variables. I'm just going to say that kind of plain statement a little bit earlier, where like if you go and try Ironman Traverse, like Ironman Traverse seems a little bit straightforward, but it's not, right? Like if you've done Ironman Traverse, there's a ton of heel hooks, there's a ton of efficiencies, there's a ton of ways to like those feet at the end to jump to that last hold are terrible footholds, right? On this face, and then your heel hook is just like it's off balance, right? You're like your left heel hook's on, you're going right-handed this way. It's pulling you all these weird wrong ways. But when you do, it's V4, I guess, right? But that's all sequential things. It's all like different operational things and sequential things. When you go onto a board and you try V4, it's really just like left, right. Can you grab this hold? And I think a lot of people enjoy that success where it's like, I didn't have to figure out all these different things. I just did it. That was kind of my blank statement. So I think it's really interesting that you're saying like the nuance behind how to have fun on it, like how to get more attracted to that experience, even once you tap it out, quote unquote, tap it out. But I'm trying to kind of also answer for those people who are like, okay, I'm going to tell you actually why I came up with this concept. It wasn't because of board climbing. It was actually because of the style that I saw at PG Sunnyvale, Planet Granite Sunnyvale, which was my home gym for a while. And Josh climbed at the gym a lot. It's where I met Josh. And the complaint that I would hear from most members was the style's just getting too complex. Like, I don't like that grade. I don't like that climb because it's just so weird. It's like, yeah, maybe it's V5 for you because you figured out the secret, but it's not V5 for me. And I'm always just sitting there like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, isn't the point of climbing for you to figure out the way to make it V5? I have to tell you that it's V5, and you have to just go and all automatically figure out the best way to do it, and then it's V5 for you, right? And the difficult part of that is that you're assuming that the route setters also can like create this amazing challenge that, yeah, once you find the secrets, and like, by the way, when you go to B pump, it really is like that, where it's like, oh, I can find the secrets to make the grades a little bit more like the grades they are. The grades are also sandbagged. But anyway, back to the point. PG Sunnyvale was notoriously a place where I heard members constantly saying like, I don't like that you like make it challenging in these crazy ways, and I can't get the grade that I'm supposed to climb. Like, I love that entitlement from people. Like, I'm supposed to climb this grade and I can't climb it because you're making it complex. It's like, okay. So I heard this thing constantly. I'm like, clearly people like success. People clearly like, and you also hear this constantly, this feedback from people who climb at movement gyms nowadays where, the movement gym facilities really cater to that member experience where members want to succeed. Members want to send the grade. So everything like V6 and under gets simpler and simpler. I think, maybe setters are straying away from that as much as possible. But if you're hearing the way that the gyms are supposed to set it up, the lower the grade, the simpler the style is supposed to be. And the boards obviously do a really good job of that. And I guess I'm just trying to point out that maybe that's not necessarily exactly what we should be listening to in terms of like our experience with rock climbing, our experience with board climbing, and our experience with gym climbing. I think that's maybe not an appropriate thing. What do you think about that?
I think it's really interesting. And it makes me think of this kind of question that you posed when we talked about B pump. I think when we were talking about B pump, this idea of like, are we just training incorrectly for climbing? Like, did we just blow it here in America where we're not interested in really fundamentally learning how to climb better? And I think that this all resonates with me because I would say that in general, in the past, I was more like what you're talking about, of someone who just enjoys being strong and seeing the solution and just doing it. And I was good at the boards in the beginning because I kind of like, I mean, just for my whole history of climbing, I came from gymnastics, so I had strength in general. And so it was very enticing for me to just use it, right? Like, it's very nice to just be like, yeah, like I can lock that off. Yeah, fuck yeah, I can lock the shit off of that. And so, and that's all you have to do? Great. And I remember going to Waco. I can't remember when I went. Maybe it was like 2013 or something. I had a really good trip to Waco where I did a bunch of hard stuff. And I remember thinking that I really enjoyed Waco. And for me, these were hard grades. I may not have this experience if I went and was trying to do something really seriously hard, but what I experienced in Waco was I just either knew I could do it or not. It's like, okay, like here's the hold, here's the foot. These holds are pretty good. Can you do it or not? And again, I just want to emphasize, like, that may have been me at those grades. And if you put me on V15, there may be a million subtleties that I would have to tap into. But I was really attracted to that. And then I'd go Squamish or even the Valley and get my ass kicked. And, it's because I couldn't showcase my strength. I was like, this isn't my style, right? Like, I just wanted to show everyone how good I was. But I couldn't there because it wasn't straightforward. And I had to learn all the subtleties. And just over time, I've really fallen in love with the subtleties, because that's just everything. Like, what did Jamie say about Jimmy? It's like, oh, Jimmy's really strong. He's unbelievably technically good. And Jimmy said this about David Fitzgerald. He has really strong fingers, and he has some of the best technique ever. And it's just like, strength is great. And don't get me wrong, I love vulgar displays of power. And this is maybe why we think we really like how Jimmy climbs. We think we really like how like Daniel Woods climbs, and we see, burly shoulders, and you're just like, oh yeah, like, and I mean, Tim, we've talked about this. We really, but underneath that is actually still a deep embracing of subtlety, of the minutia. And so it's just interesting to hear you call out that difference of the board. Like, the opposite of what I said I fell in love with is actually maybe what I first was attracted to, was the simplicity and just being able to say, oh, grab this and grip it and rip it. Fuck yeah, check mark. I can do that.
Totally. Yeah. And my goal is not to call you out or anything, but I do want to say, make a statement that you've been climbing for over 20 years. And like, obviously
30,
you have,
you've
climbed
about 30 years now. Yeah.
Shit, dude. I mean, like, think about how much you've learned about those misconceptions and like just your assumed experience when you were younger, like all the things that you learned over time. And so now when you board climb, like, yeah, you're going to have a great experience, but the vast majority of board climbing for most people is probably a mistake, right? That's just like that blanket statement I'm trying to make, because that misconception of what success and what feeling good can feel like in climbing gyms can be a huge problem, right? Like, no, what's really cool about climbing is solving, is like learning, is getting shut down and overcoming that, is discovering new ways to do something that you didn't know before. It's all of these things, right? Like, I'm not going to argue with anybody about this stuff. I've coached enough people to know like what is truly an enjoyable experience for people. It's not sending the rig, dude. Like, it's just overcoming that one crux move. It's just figuring out the new nuance of like how to grab that hold differently. It's doing a training thing for like 6 weeks and being like, now I can see more. Like, now that I have this ability, this strength, now I can actually find more. It's not that you can do more, as you can find more, right? And I think that all those aspects are not found in board climbing. Board climbing is the place to perform. Board climbing is the place to really push ourselves, test ourselves, and then over and over again on all aspects: easy climbing, medium climbing, and hard climbing for us, right? I like climbing, dude. V3 and V4 for me on the moon board is still damn hard to like send every time. I still might make a mistake and I still might fall because of how simple it is, right? It's so much like consistent output of power, strength, tension, like technique. And I love that. It's not simple climbing necessarily. It's simpler, right? There's just less that you can solve. There's less that you can find. There's no good or bad about that. I'm not saying that, but it's bad for us. It's bad for our climbing soul, because it provides a misconception that success is found by feeling good on the wall. And that's not fucking true, dude. That shit pisses me off. Like, climbing is not about feeling good all the time. It's great when you can feel good. It's great that you can send so well, that you have such good technique that the hard thing does feel good. That's great. But to feel good all the time, and that's the feeling that we're looking for, is a mistake in climbing. It's a problem in climbing. And I'm not afraid to say that stuff. I hate that philosophy in climbing currently, and that common culture in our gyms that like you need to feel good sending the grade that you're supposed to send, and it's supposed to feel good for you. It's supposed to feel easy when you do it the correct way. You're assuming a lot there, buddy. You're assuming that you know perfect climbing technique. You're assuming that you know the grade that you're climbing. You're assuming that you know everything about climbing, and you don't, right? None of us do. So just try as hard as you can, listen to what you suck at, and go work on those things. That's, for me, that's always the heart of climbing for me. And I think like board climbing just numbs it. Again, it's not the same. I board climb so much, dude, but like it just numbs it for me. Even when I do it, I'm just like, damn it, like I'm gonna go fall on the slab over there now. Like I gotta go and try that, weird coordination rig that I know I'm gonna fall 20 times on. That's V7, or whatever.
It really is a performance kind of thing. Although I will say that when I really fell in love with all those granular details, I hope that it was more than just performance. But I was talking to my buddy about how I was working my way through the benchmarks, and how it was hot though, and I was feeling it was greasy, and I didn't, it just bummed me out because maybe I didn't flash something. And he said to me, like, why don't you just climb on some of the non-benchmarks? Like, those won't affect your score. And I was like, that makes sense, but I have like no desire to. Like, I want, like, it is very performance. It's like, I want to, tick off all of the benchmarks, right? Yeah, it's interesting. Also hearing about this idea around success and fun versus, I don't know, growth, or what's climbing really about. It's like you're like anti-hedonistic climbing, where it's like only for fun. And it's interesting because I think about this with other sports. Like I was talking about this, my friends, when I did go mountain biking, and I'm like, yeah, it's really fun. And there's that in climbing for me too, going to Kalymnos and climbing mid 512s, just up these giant wall. It's just like, you're just grabbing, for me, that's a grade where I can just cruise, dude. I'm just grabbing pinches, get steep. And I just feel like a boss, where I just feel so good. I feel very in the flow, and it's not super hard for me. And I like that. But it's fun. And it's like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have fun in your climbing. I mean, I freaking went to Kalymnos twice for a month each time. But I think what you're getting at is something that I really love about our sport, is that, like, there's just all of these little nuances and mental breakthroughs. I don't know. I can't describe it well, but
yeah,
I don't know if we need to, it's like,
but I love what you're saying right there. I think you're saying it, like, there's opportunities to have fun, but you have to remind yourself, like, when those are the appropriate opportunities and when they're not, like, yeah, you like climbing 512, period. Great. But if you climb 512 in Kalymnos and you climb 512 in Lander, you'd have a totally different experience, and you're not going to have very much fun doing one of the other ones,
Why is it just all monos? Is it just short and mono?
I mean, like, yeah, like in Wild Iris, there's so many like 30, 40 foot tall routes that are just like, hey, dude, I'm grabbing monos on like 511. Like, it's insane. But for me, because I know that experience and I'm like well prepped for it, like, I can have fun on a fair amount of the grades. But I'll even hop on like low 513 and be like, that was not fun, dude. Like, that was not fun, but it's a good challenge. Like, it was great for me. And like, I just balance myself with like the reality of it, like absorbing, like, what's just being aware and being like, okay, what am I actually doing today? Like, what did I want? Did I want this? Like, maybe I shouldn't be here. Like, maybe I should just embrace it and like be a little bit tougher today, like, and I think if we were a little bit more aware of like, yeah, what you're saying, what did we want for that session? Sometimes it is important to have fun. Like, it's crazy to me that you come from a gymnastics background, dude. Like, I feel like gymnasts are the people who just like go in, grind, do the right thing. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter like what fun you're having. You just do it because you're trying to get better. And I think a lot of people like try to shy away from that from climbing, just because it's like, it's not gymnastics. And it's like, that's fine. But like, if you want to get better, you have to embrace that side of it. And we're like afraid of listening to our bodies. I think we're listening to our minds on like either end, where it's like, yeah, you want to be disciplined and like work hard and like go through the discomfort, but you also want to have fun. And it's not going to be both all the time, but you have to be aware of like what's one and another. And like I said, I think board climbing for a lot of people is that quick, easy access to that fun. And, but it's this like weird balance where it's also good training, and, you want to train good, but then you also want to have fun. And I feel like just that balance of like deep diving on your own self, and everyone has a different answer for this. Like, I'm glad that you shared exactly how you have fun with the board climbing for you. You just look deeper and like find the nuances and perform better. And I think a lot of people are going to, learn a lot from that, because they can just take that to their own sessions. But, everyone has their own way of like, for me, it's mostly language, right? It's mostly just like coming in and just like thinking for a while, warming up. And it's usually found in my warm up where I'm like grabbing some holds to jump to some holds. Like, I do some like fun movements. I'm like, all right, what's today's session going to be? And then I just pick what that session's going to be. I meet myself where I'm at that day, and I see like, what's the best that I can do. Usually I would like to lean towards, not having fun and just like pushing myself, but sometimes that session's not going to be there that day. And I have to meet myself there and be like, all right, dude, fuck the 4x4s. Like, I'm not going to do the hardest board projects. I'm just going to like try to work on my breath work and technique, and like, but just try to like do my best. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter to me, like making those sends that day matter less. it's up to me, like that's totally up to me. And I think it's okay to be like, all right, no sends today matter.
Yeah, I guess we need another word for the joy that comes from diving in deep, deconstructing something, learning more about yourself. It's like fun isn't quite the word for that. And I think, I don't think that's just unique to climbers or anything. But just that's kind of going that extra distance. Like what is pulling you forward to trying harder climbs for you, whatever, even if it's not hard or great, like you just want to keep understanding your body and climbing and the rock and the whatever the problem or route might be. Like there's just this pull that isn't quite the same as having fun, and just knowing like there's a time and a place. And yeah, so it's interesting to hear that what you think draws people to board climbing, like there's like it's like both ends of the spectrum, right? Like so you posited this idea that people get attracted to the board because it's so simple and it tells them, like, it gives them a very clear feedback, like you are strong and you did that climb, bravo. And for me, I kind of showcase that there is a other end of the spectrum where it's like, okay, you went unbelievably deep on like the most micro of beta and you did it, bravo. And I don't know, I'm not sure how that all is summarized nicely for why people are attracted to board climbing, but I just do see more and more people heading towards the board. One thing I wanted to say that you reminded me of is people who get obsessed with that performance on the board and just want to feel strong. Is I've harped on this before, where I just can't believe how many people don't keep their feet on the board, who climb extremely hard, and it just shows me that they're missing something really deep in how they climb. And ideally, if they embrace that end of the spectrum I talked about the micro beta, they might recognize that they could have kept their foot on. But I am concerned that if people only climb on the board, they just get used to jumping and latching, and it can lead you down this path where you don't really understand what you're doing, and you're so focused on getting to the top when it's just left, right, and then you're missing out on
that success. Can be so much misconception, right? Like that's what you're saying, where like just because you did the climb doesn't mean you did the climb the best way. Like we cannot be results oriented in a sport like climbing, where like just because you sent doesn't mean you did it correctly, or it doesn't mean you did it the best possible way, is what you're saying. And board climbing definitely leans itself towards that, where it's like you could definitely overpower a lot of the technique on a lot of the boards. Like, yeah, when you're trying stuff that's past your limit, and then you have to figure out the nuances. And then for you probably lean towards using your footwork and like using your momentum and timing and all these great habits, but like not everybody does. And not everybody even has the ability to do that because they don't even know, So like, that's for me, like a big reason why I'm harping on the board climbing experience so much. And like, again, I board climb so much because I'm like Josh, where like I use the board climbing to teach myself all those things, but it's a mistake to think that everyone does that. And I think a lot of people struggle really hard in their grand climbing experience, in their macro climbing experience. You might have more fun than you would have in other climbing places day to day, but in your macro, it's not healthy for you if you cannot unlock that next level. So it's either, for me, it's like one of two things: like unlock that next level, just bash your head against the wall on this one thing and listen to what you could do better, right? And just over and over again, find the nuances like Josh is saying, or like change your attitude, change your mindset, change your language around what board climbing actually is to you, so that you can see it for what it is, for one, but also improve in like different ways, right? It's a mistake to think like that one, you're sending V6s and V7s, but that one V5 you couldn't do over there, like that's just the one you couldn't do. Like, no, go and try that thing, go learn it, like go figure out why you didn't do it, why you couldn't do it, right? And because it's usually that you didn't do it, not that you couldn't do it, right? Obviously, if you're climbing V6 and 7s, you can do the other one that's actually V5. Or it's up to you to like redefine the grade and be like, all right, it's not actually a V5. And that's also okay. Like there's so much realness in climbing that I think we kind of skip past if we're, again, focused on the result. If we're focused on the result and that result leads us and that's our North Star, that's incorrect in my opinion. Like I kind of always say this to, I actually learned this a lot from like comp climbing and like the comp climbing world, where if you need validation as a climber, you need to check your mentality, right? If you need to feel validation for that day, and like this is countless things in competition climbing, right? If you're training as a comp climber, like you're pretty much always pissed off because you're like doing slabs that are like V7 and you're like a V13 climber and you're falling over and over and you can't do it. You know, you're trying a bunch of different movements that you have no idea how to do. And there's so much volatility in like comp climbing movements. It's like you feel entitled to be able to send these things and you feel entitled to make them feel easy, but they don't, right? So I constantly am coaching competitive athletes in the exact same language. I'm like, it doesn't matter, man. Like you just go and you try, right? Like if you go to a competition, like I've come away from so many competitions and had this toxic mentality where I'm like, damn, okay, I sent these like 2 out of these 4 boulders, but those 2 other boulders that I didn't do got sent by these people who are weaker than me and they're worse than me. It's like that statement right there is entitled. And that statement right there just shows it's not what, you know, it's not what they're better than you at. It's what you aren't good at, right? And I think that's a really important thing to look inside and like approach your climbing and be like, all right, I didn't do those things. Like I made mistakes and I didn't do those things. How can I work on that, right? But it's much better to say that than like, I don't know, I just don't like that style. Like that person got lucky. Like they're way better at style than me. You know, the height, like whatever, like their skin. Like you find yourself saying a lot of these types of things. You need to check yourself, right? You need to check your own mentality and like work on it, because that's the point. That's the point of why we do this, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I heard from that, and just, to try to kind of summarize, it sounds like if you are attracted to boards, it's like, why? Are you just enjoying putting out your power and just having this really binary experience where you're like, I can grab this hold and I grab this hold. This is my style, or this showcases something I can do. And you can take that lens, you can put it onto anything else. You can say, oh, I like Waco, or, I like this area because I have a lot of success there. And so, yeah, it's just great. And, again, we can put that lens onto anything, whether it's slab climbing, roof climbing, pockets. I don't know. I don't care. And you have to just ask yourself, yeah, why am I so attracted to this? Right. Like, and, there's a hint there that maybe you're leaving something on the table as far as progress goes. And I would also argue that if you only are attracted and only seek out things that you're good at, you're in trouble. And I mean, this is something we've gone over before. It's like, yes, all these things that make the pro climbers great are often a showcasing of their strengths. It's like, oh, like this person is an incredible crimper, so they, climb this like V16 or V17 crimping test piece. But even their quote unquote like anti-style, it's like it's still V15, right? So they aren't ones like, you may not always see it in the media, but all the best climbers climb everything. And in fact, I would argue that they're often attracted to those things that aren't so good, that they've struggled in the past. And hopefully that was you can see that that's a breakthrough for me, where I had said that I was attracted to things that just allowed me to display my style. And I've grown to enjoy the process of getting into things that I maybe don't have immediate success on. And I think that's really, I think it's really crucial. I mean, you've talked about crimpers and slopers and how you really started enjoying slopers because you were bad at them. And, I don't want people to think that what I'm saying is you need to focus on your weaknesses always, because like that, we've harped on how pros are good because of their special, unique strengths also in being themselves. But those are pros. And like, yes, we're about good to great. But part of that journey is still making sure that you don't just shy away from, like, oh, I don't like this type of thing. I don't like boards. Well, maybe there's a secret there then for you, and you could grow a lot by finding that love.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. Like, the best part of you as a climber and the weakest part of you as a climber has to be a small gap, right? And no matter where and you want to constantly be pushing that like best part of you as a climber, but do not leave that worst part of you as a climber behind, because you're gonna be so unhappy. Like you're gonna be so unhappy. And I can tell you, any pro climber who listens to this and knows their weakest link, it just gets them. Like, if I put any pro climber on their weakest climb, they're going to be sitting there pissed off, probably trying it way more times than they should, having bad habits over and over again. And yeah, I'm going to correct a little bit of what you said. Like, I know a lot of pro climbers who actually have extremely strong strengths and extremely strong weaknesses, And, that's their biggest leak. But the climbers that I respect the most personally are the ones who have that smallest gap, right? And I think we should always work on ourselves to just lessen that gap and really truly understand, like you said, like, why do we lean for those strengths as much, and why do we lean away? In both physical reasons and mental reasons, right? And just learning those traps on ourselves, I think, can teach us a lot about our experience as a whole. And not avoid things just because we want to avoid things, and not just go for things just because we want to go for things, but having like a real deeper layer behind that, I think, is super, super important.
All right, Tim, that was a really good statement. That idea of closing the gap between your strongest strength and your weakest link. I thought that was really, really cool. So I'm going to call it there, Tim.
Hell yeah.
I had a great time despite my not having the best couple of weeks since we did our last one. Who knows what the next couple of weeks will bring. So I had a blast, and this just was really fun, dude.
Yes, sir. Good luck with the shoulder, Josh. We're all hoping you a fast recovery. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
All right, Tim. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.